Good morning. Good morning to ladies and gentlemen. Trust I'm further around. Today we are commemorating a very important day in the UN calendar or the WHO calendar. It happens to be the World Food Safety Day. And in Sri Lanka and globally, I think the significance of food safety has reached a peak today. In fact, today in the morning, when we were listening to the early morning news, the first item that came on the program was about the food safety, and in Sri Lanka, more in line with the food security. So today we are going to discuss. We have an eminent panelist here who is going to not only discuss the crisis but also discuss more about solutions for the crisis. So with that opening remarks, I also wish to introduce our association, the Institute of Food Science and Technology, which is the foremost body in the food science and technology field. And we are doing quite a lot of activity with the industry as well as the academics being together in this kind of environment. So that is the significance of this whole event. The Institute of Food Science and Technology works very closely with the Sri Lanka Food Processors Association. And one of the programs that we are doing is also the Pro Foods Pro Pack, which is part and parcel of the activities that we do. So with the today's theme being safer food for better health, I think we have Professor Resha. Are we ready to go with the video?
Yes, Mr.
Okay. Yeah. We have a very significant event today. We have the WHO head in the Asia Pacific region, Professor Gongal, will be presenting us a video, a short video about the significance of the today's Food Safety Day. Okay, over to you.
First of all, I would like to congratulate the Institute of Food Science and Technology Sri Lanka for organizing a webinar to observe World Food Safety Day 2022. As I understand, the webinar will highlight the importance and interlinkage between food safety, food security, and nutrition in the context of ongoing national crisis in Sri Lanka, which is timely and appropriate. The theme of this year's observance of World Food Safety Day is Safer Food, Better Health. That highlights the essential role that safe and nutritional food plays in ensuring human health and well-being. It should be noted that unsafe food undermines food and nutritional security. The health of our food systems profoundly affects the health of our lives, as well as the health of our environment, our economies, and our culture. Considering the fact that the current food systems needs urgently to change in the context of intensification and commercialization of food production system, growing pandemic threats, and impact of climate change in future of our planets, the UN Secretary General convened a Food System Summit in 2021 as part of the Decade of Actions to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. It is critical to transform food system not only resilient, inclusive, and sustainable, but also healthy and safe. This year is special for us as 75th World Health Assembly adopted global strategy for food safety, and it will accelerate implementation of the framework for action on food safety in WHO Southeast Asia region, as both are complementary to each other. The framework for action on food safety has a wide vision of safe and healthy food for all individuals through strengthening the food system's food control system. Food safety is everyone's responsibility and therefore everyone's business. Food safety authorities have a critical role to play in managing food safety risk along the entire food chain, including traditional food markets, which are part of our social fabric, and 80% of the food produced in our region, it is produced and distributed, marketed informally. Consumers have the power to drive change. They need to be empowered to make healthy food choices for themselves and support sustainable food systems for the planet. Given the complexity of food safety, consumers need to access to timely, clear, and reliable information about the nutritional and disease risk associated with their food choices, which is relevant in present crisis situation. At the end, I would like to quote a statement from Dr. Poonam Khetrapal Singh, Regional Director, WHO Southeast Asia Region, on the occasion of the World Food Safety Day 2022. Quote, WHO reiterated its commitment to support member states to ensure that every person can access sufficient, safe and healthy foods for a healthier, safer and more sustainable world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Professor Gangal giving us a bit of an input about the importance of the event, the significance of WHO. Now it is my pleasure to present to you a well-known figure in the Institute of Food Science and Technology, as well as in the food fraternity in the not only in this country but worldwide. This is no other than Emeritus Professor Upali Samarjeva, who is a reputed research scientist who continues to work with the Institute of Food Science and Technology as the chairman of the governing board. Though he resides in Canada, he has worked in more than 35 countries as an international consultant in the areas of food safety and laboratory development under different UN bodies such as World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and USA. He is a chemist by profession and a microbiologist by training, now working in food science and technology. Over to you, Professor Samarjeva. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunsekara. President and members of the Institute of Food Science and Technology, Sri Lanka, dear participants. It's my pleasure to start this seminar with a presentation addressing safer foods and better health. And the title which I'm going to talk on today is Food Safety and Nutrition Concerning Food Security. In the light of what has been happening in Sri Lanka and the current issues, it has become necessary for us to look at food safety and nutrition from an angle which is slightly different from the angle anybody else would look at in the other countries. So we are looking from that angle, and I would like to start by introducing certain terms which should be important for us to understand what we are going to discuss today. So the first term is food safety, which refers to all those hazards, whether chronic or acute, that may make food injurious to health of the consumers, and food safety is not negotiable. So it's a question, we cannot talk about it and try to sort it out. We have to address the issues and clear it. This leads to, food safety issues leads to foodborne illnesses and increased hospitalization of the persons. So that is why food safety and human health are very closely connected to each other. Also, we talk about food quality, which is different from food safety, which includes all other attributes that influence the product's value to the consumer. Then we come to the next term we are going to use, nutrition. It refers to obtaining food to meet dietary needs of the body. So in Sri Lanka, the impending problems under the current situation are undernutrition and increased exposure to anti-nutrients. So we must understand that good nutrition is needed to maintain immunity of the body. So it gets connected to health in a different way. The third word I am going to define, the third term, is food security, which refers to the state of having reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable and nutritious food. So with those three documents, which I am going to follow strictly in my discussion, I like to enter the subject a little more deeply. Now, when we talk about food security and food safety, as you already realize, there are three words that comes in. One is access. Access means ensuring that all people across the world have access to sufficient food to meet their dietary needs. Then linked with that is sovereignty, which means empowering people to make their own choice about the food they eat, where it comes from, and how it is produced. And the third linkage is the safety, which means ensuring people to have healthy, nutritious food that is free from contamination or degradation. As you see, the three circles overlap with each other. Therefore, when we are talking about safety, we are compelled to talk about the security as well as the access to the food. Also, there is a fourth component in it, which is the heritage. That is our own way of preparing food, our culinary practices, our likes and dislikes, our way of deciding on the foods which we want to have. So all these things get linked together when it comes to food safety, because we cannot talk about food safety if we allow anything to go wrong in our system. Now, to take it a little further, I like to show you the complexities associated with food safety in handling the food chain. Now, what we see in the yellow boxes are the steps in food preparation, starting from farming, primary processing, secondary processing, cooking, consumption, health effects, symptoms that may arise due to health effects, understanding the cause-effect relationships, and science-based solutions. Now, in this chain, you see the red boxes tells us various kinds of things that can happen, things which we need to guard, things which we have to be careful in addressing food safety. So if you take the situation at the farm level, we need to ensure that we meet the threshold requirements for water, soil, pesticides, fertilizer, and veterinary drugs. We can't go beyond the expected and allowed limits of use.
Recording in progress.
Then we get into the second situation where we have to look at how we are going to check the situations along the line. Now that is done by a variety of methods, which includes the regulations and specifications which are established internationally and nationally that is going to look after our needs. So in this complex situation, our problem is to see how we could avoid all kinds of problems by carefully handling the things at each and every point. So food safety, therefore, ultimately goes back to the farm and works right along the chain for us to get a safe food for better life. Now at this point, since many people still are not very clear about the terms food quality and nutrition against food safety, I would like to introduce it again. The food quality refers to what you see in the left-hand picture: appearance, color, flavor, texture, wholesomeness, maturity, and mouthfeel, which people have gained through experiences. Then when it comes to nutrition, we are talking about the nutritional facts which are present in the label of the food that we are going to buy. As against this, we have the food safety, where we expect the foods to be free of pathogenic disease-causing bacteria, aflatoxins and other mycotoxins, residues of pesticides, residues of antibiotics, heavy metals, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, various migrants that may come from the packages, unpermitted additives, and non-food contaminants. So when we are talking about food safety, when we want to achieve better health through food safety, we need to address these components and ensure that they don't enter the system and create problems for us. So now in our effort to talk about safer food and better health, we have to think about the place where the foods are produced. So they are produced by the farmer, maybe in the paddy field, maybe in the tea gardens, maybe in the vegetable plots. Now for these people to be active, to do their job, to serve us effectively, we need to give them certain inputs. That includes lands and water, planting materials, agri-chemicals, guidance, and markets. So that's the prime responsibility of the state to ensure that the food producers, the farmers, get these things so that they can produce the food that we are expecting. Then they would be able to produce food for the nation. They will be gainfully employed because they have a lot of work to do. They will bring in foreign exchange to the country. This will reduce the poverty among the farmer community, and also it will bring in happy families, both in the farmer community as well as the general public. So we are right now with these problems because we have not been able to meet what is in green in the right-hand column, because there are certain limitations on the material in the left-hand column due to various reasons. So in our effort to think about safer food for better health, we have to think about food security and food safety together. We cannot separate the two and go ahead for a discussion. Now, let me move into the area of food safety and try to understand what is happening in Sri Lanka. If you look at the global information, our food security index has gone down from 43rd position to 77th position over the last 10 years. Our hunger index has got worsened from 43rd to the 65th position. So we are in a situation where we are going down on every aspect. And we need to understand when the food safety problems arise, the global burden that comes from foodborne diseases is very high. It is calculated to be that it disables the people for 33 million life years. So that's a lot which will affect every one of us globally, and Sri Lanka is no exception to that situation. So in this background, what can we do? If you want to have safer food for better health, we need to start thinking about national regulations and application of codex systems. We need to concentrate ourselves on food safety and quality. We need to think about proper labeling, including declaration of the allergens which are affecting the health of the people. And we need to provide guidance to the consumers and educate the consumers. If we don't do all these things, we cannot start talking about food safety in the country. To do that, we have to have accredited HACCP certification systems, which is available in Sri Lanka. We have to have accredited test reports coming from accredited labs. Yes, it is available in Sri Lanka. But we need to understand, without fulfilling all those 4 criteria, our telling about compliance with Sri Lankan food specifications alone is not adequate for us to ensure food safety. So our challenge, therefore, is to see how our system works in this line. Then, ladies and gentlemen, there's a cost for consuming unsafe food. The cost can come in different forms. When we are in a crisis like what we are facing today, people will start moving into other foods which they were not experiencing earlier. Therefore, we must understand consumption of unsafe foods will lead to more than 200 diseases, starting from diarrhea to cancer. This will result in 1 out of 10 people in the world falling ill due to contaminated foods. There will be about 420,000 persons dying annually due to contaminated foods. 70% of the cases of these global illnesses are in the sub-Saharan Africa and South and Southeast Asia. So we are the bigger component in this problem. Also, in the low and middle income countries, the unsafe foods cost about 100 billion US dollars as estimated by World Bank. So we are in this situation and we are beginning to move into various unknown foods, perhaps because we don't have the known foods. Let us see some of the things that's happening around us. There's a lot of concern right now to consume jack. It's a good idea, but the jack will not be there for after 2 months. So we have to go through a long period of famine as we understand, and jack can support that only for a couple of months. Then we are talking about having more manioc, and I can see all the places where there are people beginning to plant manioc. We had similar experiences in 1973 when we planted manioc in big way everywhere in every possible land. That can lead to unseen, unforeseen problems, which I will discuss later. Then also we are pushing for the growing of the foods in pots. That may be okay. People can do it in the balcony. That's good. Then yesterday I saw a discussion through the internet about consuming guava leaves. Now, guava leaves will be a very good source of various functional foods, but not carbohydrates, proteins, and so on. So this is the danger. People will now start eating different kinds of leaves, thinking that it is going to save their malnutrition problems. Then we come to the last one, which is the coconut flour. Now, coconut flour could be made from the coconut refuse which we have. Now, this coconut refuse which we are talking about, which is available in each home, each country, each home, they carry, when it is dried to about 5% moisture, they carry 10 to 19% proteins. We are throwing away that. 10 to 12% fats, and about 50 to 70% carbohydrates. So we have an important source which we need to concentrate on right now at the moment, because we are going to get into problems with our protein requirements. So the messages that is being around, which you have seen, we need to look at them from the angle of food safety. We need to look at them from the angle of nutrition and also from the angle of health. So one of the purposes of this seminar is for us to examine these questions and try to understand which way we should go and how carefully we should move in this direction. Now, there are two things tied up, the food safety and the food and nutrition, along with food security and fuel prices. That is the situation in Sri Lanka. How are we going to look after this situation is the problem. Under this situation, what may happen is people will start seeking new, hitherto unexplored foods. People will go for forest foods of unknown safety. Already the government is encouraging people to go and pluck jack from the forests. But I don't think there's any jack left in the forest with the monkeys around. Then people will start moving into various leafy vegetables like drumstick leaves and so on, which if you don't process properly, will have various anti-nutrients coming in, and which is affecting the digestion of even the little protein that we will be consuming. Then we may rush to mushrooms, and we might end up misidentifying mushrooms and consuming poisonous mushrooms and various allergenic foods. We may rush to get more meat by targeting the pigs, the monkeys, etc. That has happened in many countries of the world. When there is no food, that can happen. and that will also bring in new issues related to parasitic infections and viral diseases to the malnourished people who are using this uncontrolled meats that is coming in, which is wild. We may go for ocean plants as foods. Seaweeds are well known, and people may take a step forward and go for all kinds of algae in the sea and end up with toxic algae. So we need to educate the people. We need to understand the problem. Then we come to increased consumption of yams, especially manioc. We may go for leaf malum or manioc, which contains a fair amount of cyanide. And also, when you start consuming manioc every day, 3 meals a day, little by little, we are accumulating cyanide in our body, which will go beyond the threshold limits. Now, in 1973, I could remember that there were news items every day in the newspapers on people dying with cyanide poisoning associated with overconsumption of manioc as well as consumption of manioc leaf malum, which is not properly heat treated to get rid of cyanide. So these are the issues that we will have to face, which the country has to think about, which the scientist has to work on, which the health sector has to keep their eyes open on. When it comes to food preparations and processing, naturally there will be under-processed foods because there is a fuel shortage. So the drying and heat processing or even cooking will be done with a very shorter period of time. There will be delayed and unrefrigerated transport of food and storage. Already people are complaining about the meat available in supermarkets. Then there will be increased food adulteration in this situation. So we are facing all these problems in a situation where the human resource is limited in the local food control system. So now the local food control system need to think differently, take a different approach to address these issues, leaving out the conventional approach. Then also, there's a move to have community food preparation and common kitchens. Well, it's a very good concept that will help the people, that will help the country. But also, one need to be very careful about that aspect, because when you start doing this, I know already there are 3 locations in Colombo, a temple, a church, and a mosque, which has started it. In Colombo, things may be better, but this concept will go out to the villages, and then the problems will become much more severe. Why do these things happen? These food will be served to more vulnerable groups not having regular meals. So they are more susceptible to food safety issues if there's a problem with the food. Then in the villages, the availability of chlorinated water for washing will be low. So there will be cleanliness issues, contaminations. There will be low availability of cooking fuels, therefore undercooking, as I said earlier. People may not use detergents to wash all the plates and everything. In fact, we heard a week back, some people were using antiseptics to wash the liquor bottles. So we need to be very careful about use of the detergents and avoiding the use of antiseptics. There will be delayed transport of food preparation prepared in one site into another site, and there will be non-functional cold chains. As a result, the food will be getting contaminated and the microorganisms will be growing faster. So this also leads to a situation where we will not be able to depend on reliable, safe food chains because production and transport have their own problems. Therefore, the need today is strong guidance and supervision from the public health inspectors and food inspectors beyond their controlled punishment approach. They alone cannot do it. We need to mobilize the university students and school children through appropriate messages, which should become a responsibility jointly of the universities as well as the health sector of the country. Now, in managing the food safety for better health lies in monitoring and training the food handling to comply with good practices. That has to come at the industry level. The governments need to think, the state has to think about investing to address the challenges with food distribution, food sanitation, food hygiene, water scarcity, and handling the food wastes. And finally, one has to start thinking about applying modern management systems to trace the origins of foods and environmental pollution issues. So this is something that has to come from the state sector, coupled with the people, the industries who are responsible for producing, processing, and delivering foods to the public. Now, when we have this situation, when we talk about food safety, let us look at what happened around us. Starting from 1990 down to 2017, all those countries listed here, they went into new acts called Food Safety Act. So you could see the word safety, sanitation, pure food, all those words are coming in. But unfortunately, Sri Lanka has not moved in that direction, although there are a few officers designated as food safety officers, but we have not changed our regulations. We have not started moving in that direction. So in this situation, we need to start thinking, though we are late, at least now, what we should be doing if we are to fall in line with rest of the countries in the world. We need to understand the global approach is prevention, as we see from all those new acts, not the endpoint testing. So that's the approach we have to think about. How are we going to get it? The base for this approach is laid down with a strong foundation by Codex and others, voluntarily laid down and practiced by WTO, OECD, and IPPC. The national and regional regulations are expected to be based on this foundation, and they have to be mandatory, and they need to address safety, hygiene, and quality, as well as maximum residue levels. Then there is the voluntary ISO standards, which some industries are practicing in Sri Lanka, and also the private schemes requiring the food for various specific purposes in specific countries. So this triangle, we have 4 layers, and we have to build all those 4 layers together, collectively, by all the organizations in the country. Now, if we are to build this, we need to work together. We have to play our roles together. And that cannot be done by a single ministry. And we require to get together, Ministry of Health and Ministry of Agriculture, work with Ministry of Consumer Affairs and Ministry of Fisheries, because they have a lot of good experience in addressing food safety, and think about developing a system. Now this slide, I may have shown 100 times over the last 3 years. And during that last 3 years, we had 6 ministers of health. One of them listened to this when it was presented by the Food Advisory Council, but it did not go beyond that place. One of my colleagues working internationally tells me, Upali, if you want to make this a success, you have to keep on telling 200 times to the people. So I am in this process of telling it 200 times. I have just passed the 100th time. I hope I'll be able to do it to ensure food safety for better health. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Samarjiva, for giving us that input and your very valuable comments about the safety aspect of food. I think we have all gathered so much through this presentation. In fact, we welcome you to have any Q&A that is coming in to put it on the chat, so that we will be addressing all the chats later during our Q&A session, which will be headed by Professor Samarjiva. So in the meantime, I welcome you all to, if you have any questions or clarifications, please post it on the chat box, so that we will be gathering it up and addressing all these things at a during the Q&A session. My next presentation would be by Dr. Veerakon. In fact, we are addressing the most significant issue, the crop production, and how to overcome the crisis through crop production. Dr. Veerakon is an agronomist and a former Director General of Agriculture in Sri Lanka. He is a researcher, a research manager, a program developer, and an analyst. He's a postgraduate teacher over 30 years, and after 7 years of managerial experience on national level agriculture research and development on Sri Lanka related to disciplines such as policy formulation, project development, activity planning, and overall national level agriculture management. As a researcher, research director, additional secretary, and Director General of Agriculture in Sri Lanka. So he has also collaborated with many national and international organizations as well as with funding agencies. Has over 40 publications, scientific research publications and articles in research journals. He has received the 2000 Start Young Scientist Award. This has happened in 2009 for his research work over 10 years. So over to you, Dr. Veerakon.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I hope everybody can see the screen. I'll be discussing on the current food crisis in Sri Lanka, the situation management in crop production. As Professor Samariji was very correctly said in the second slide, farming is very important as far as the food safety is concerned, and there should be science-based solutions. In a crisis situation like this, what is happening in Sri Lanka, I'm sure there will be a lot of problems with food safety because every bit and piece of food will be collected by people for their own consumption. Then I will straight away go to the food security status in this country. The second column says the national requirement, and the third column tells you about the imports in 2018. And of course, we know there's ups and downs. We are self-sufficient in paddy. We were becoming self-sufficient in maize and many of these crops. In the next slide, I will tell you that. But gradually until 2020, 2021, we increase our production levels, we increase our productivity, and we reduce our import requirements. So we were becoming a self-sufficient nation in most of the crops until 2021. Now, let's look at the figures where we have until 2021 in the four rows on the top. Paddy, we are self-sufficient. We had excess production in 2021 year. We have produced 5.1 million tons of paddy. Maize, for the first time in the history, we have produced 475,000 tons, which is against the requirement of 500,000 tons. So likewise, groundnut sesame, we were self-sufficient. We were becoming self-sufficient in black gram, cowpeas, green gram, and finger millet. That, thanks to all these policy decisions taken and the support given by the government until 2021, year 2021, we were going on upward trend. There was a problem with big onion because there was an increase and then there was a decrease. But overall, there was a tremendous increase in food production in this country. And we were aiming to be self-sufficient except potato and onion by 2025. You can see the dry chili, the total quantity is being imported. But with all these new technologies, we are planning to become self-sufficient in 2025, producing all what is required. This was not just by doing it using all these traditional methods. You can see on the top one, you see all these traditional methods which we enjoyed until 1990s. And then there was an era of change. We developed new resistant varieties, new methods of farming and everything. And then later, at the latter stage, we were planning and we were doing precision farming technologies in Sri Lanka. All these are not from internet, these are from Sri Lankan real soils. But to do that, of course, we have to admit that we are using heavy loads of pesticides. Our weedicide requirement was very much higher. All of that, almost 99% was imported. And in 2016, the total volume of pesticides was around 4,000 metric tons. They were brought into this country. The majority is weedicides, about 50%, insecticides, and then fungicides. this approximately about 50% of these pesticides and weedicides are due to this overwhelming cost of labor and labor shortages, because they are trying to use all these agrochemicals to make sure that to overcome their agronomic deficiencies. So that's a bad part of it. But what will happen? What happened was in 2021 there was a complete ban, and all these agrochemicals which were coming in through the legal means with quality tested agrochemicals, all these untested, very highly toxic chemicals started to come in through the back door. If you look at this slide, you will see that Sri Lanka is one of the lowest pesticide use countries in the world, developed countries, among the developed countries. USA is 0.998 kilograms per hectare, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, it's about 0.308 kilograms per hectare. I will still say that this is a little higher figure. We must reduce this amount also, that we can do in the future. What happened with the ban on fertilizer and agrochemicals in May 2021? The repercussion of that is no quality tested chemical fertilizer was available in the country. Of course, there were, but it was not available to the normal general poor farm. And the quality tested agrochemicals were also not available. And there was an increased availability of illegal, inferior quality agrochemicals and fertilizers in the market. You know, everybody in Sri Lanka knows every corner of this country has the glyphosate, which has a higher strength than what is available earlier. Many agrochemicals are not used in Sri Lanka that arrived through illegal means. Apart from that, the production, because of this non-availability of fertilizer, dropped by 50 to 70%. We all know that we had a very good system of using insecticides in this country. I mean, importing insecticides. We were moving towards the class 3 and class 4, and we just removed class 1 and class 2 pesticides, and we were moving towards better pesticides and less toxic to human beings. But what happened with the banning of fertilizer and agrochemicals? The production, this is just one slide on rice productivity. We were going ahead, and by 2010, around that time, we passed the self-sufficient level, and the brownish line is the requirement, and you can see ups and downs. This is mainly because of this climate variability. We were going very well until 2021, and see how it has come. In 2022, the production is just enough to feed the nation for about 7 months. Normally, we used to produce in excess amounts for about 11, 12, more than 13 months. But now it is not like that. It is we are running short of food, and we have only for 7 months. And that's why the people predict that there will be a shortage of food if we do not import. Then we can't import also. We have a huge foreign crisis, foreign exchange crisis. So there will be an issue in the future. Similarly, the animal production, as I told you, needs animal feed. Maize is a major component of animal feed. We reached the required amount, but with one gazette notification, everything went to the other way. So not only these two, I just took examples of these two, all the other crops, productivity and the production went down. So there was a big issue of vegetables, fruits, of course, that was not much affected, but other field crops and other the major cereals. Now, to produce that, whatever said and done, I must tell you that we all know as scientists, the crop needs nutrients. It must absorb this amount of nutrients to produce the expected yield that is shown in the fourth column. Now, without giving that, there's no way that we can do it. If you say rice, it will absorb about 110 kilograms of nitrogen to give 5 tons per hectare of yield. So this nitrogen, plant doesn't know where it is coming from, whether it's organic or inorganic form. It will be absorbed as nitrates and ammonia. I'm not going to go into detail. What is required is we have to give these nutrients as and when necessary to the plant. But what is happening in the farmer's field? The recommended NPK for total quantity is about 226. With this, DOA has received 37 tons per hectare yield. But the farmer, when the fertilizer is available at free of charge, basically, he has used 922 kilograms of the total, and produce only 40 tons. So this gap, 37 and 40, was bridged with the excess of say, around 600 kilograms on it. This has to be stopped. Excessive fertilizer usage increase the pest damages, and that will then again he started spraying chemicals to make sure that his crop is intact. The excess chemical fertilizer usage will have the pest damage, plus it will absorb and in its own form within the plant. You can see the nitrate accumulation with increasing in application of fertilizer. Now the acceptable nitrate intake limit is around 3.56 milligrams of nitrate per day per kilogram body weight. I'm sure with this excess amount of nitrates available for vegetable cultivation, there will be definitely increasing in our nitrate intakes, which has to be stopped. So the excess amounts of chemical fertilizer applied to agricultural soils in Sri Lanka that we have to admit, we must control it. We must give at least the real amount. The farmers apply agrochemicals unnecessarily to protect their crop. One reason is because of the unnecessary usage of fertilizer plus the agronomic deficiencies. That will definitely reduce the quality of the product, and the farmers do not adhere to the pre-harvest intervals, and product safety of human consumption will go down. And then the other thing what the farmers do is the whole of rice cultivation, they depends on weedicides. Of course, there must have weedicides with the designated rice environment, but they are trying to use weedicides to overcome the deficiencies, management deficiencies of their own. If you look at the fertilizer that is imported into this country, there's nothing wrong in it. If you look at this region, we are the best in terms of quality. Look at now, all these qualities are developed based on their own soils. Now look at this arsenic. Bangladesh has not even testing arsenic because the soil is very much rich in arsenic, so they can't even use fertilizer which is less arsenic, whereas we have the lowest. Cadmium, we have the lowest standards. Lead 30, we have the lowest standards. Chromium 50, we have the lowest standards. So that means we are importing, of course, this was devised from around 2012 or something, but right now we are importing the best of the best fertilizers to this country. But quantity matters a lot. When you take off urea, it is a safe molecule, which only problem is with the pyrite. No heavy metals in that, but the efficiency is very much lower, 15 to 20%. TSP get fixed away, and again 15 to 20%. MOP again the same thing, fixed away. So we must increase the nutrient use efficiency and reduce the nitrogen loose into these water bodies, so that the water bodies that we are going to consume will also be safe than the food that you are going to consume. Now, if you look at many people say that we are the highest in this world, a lot of newspaper articles and all these things are there. But if you look at the developing countries like Myanmar, Zimbabwe, Nepal, and there are many Nigerias, all that, we are of course on the top. This must be stopped. But if you look at the other one, among the developed countries like India, Vietnam, South Korea, China, we are here, the black one in the bottom. So compared to these developed countries, they use heavy amount of fertilizer, especially nitrogen, per acre of crop land. But compared to our own developing countries in this region, we are looking very much higher. But still, with all this, we are not loading a lot of heavy metals into our soils. This is the standards for metal and fertilizers and supplements in Canadian Food Agency. It says that maximum acceptable cumulative metal addition to soil for a 45-year long-term period is, say, for example, arsenic 15, cadmium 4. But if you look at the TSP, which is being used, TSP is the most biggest culprit. The level is around 3 ppm. If you assume that the TSP has cadmium of 5 ppm, with a recommendation of 55 kilograms for P2O5 per hectare. Now it has come down to half of this. The cadmium loading for 45 years will be 0.026 kilograms of cadmium per hectare of arable land, of rice. So that means we are still in a better state, and we have to make sure that this will continue in the future too. But on the other hand, if you think of organic fertilizer, that is not free from toxic metals. Many people argue that organic fertilizer is much safer. But if you look at the Sri Lankan standards, as well as the other countries, the organic matter contains high amount of lead to all these heavy metals. That depends on the place where it is born. If you get the correct organic matter from all our districts, then of course there won't be a problem. But we have to remember one thing: we are talking of tons as against kilograms of fertilizer that we are going to apply. So if you think of rice, we recommend 225 kilograms per hectare of rice per urea, whereas we recommend roughly about 10 tons of organic matter into the soil if you are going to go for an organic farming in this country. And if you do that 10 tons, there will be reduction in 30% in yield because you cannot give all the nitrogen requirement. This just slides, it was a little controversial one because of course everybody was arguing against the import of organic matter. What we did was we calculated based on the SI standards, where the organic matter standard they have defined. The organic matter should not contain 1.5 milligrams per kilogram of cadmium. Chemical fertilizer is free, and arsenic free and all that. If you want to put organic matter for our rice cultivation alone, we calculated how much of organic matter is required to give the exact amount of nutrient to the soil. And then from one season organic matter, which is coming from outside or developed within the Sri Lankan situation with the maximum amount of heavy metal that can be in using the SLA standards. Within one season, if you use organic matter alone with these standards, we'll add 5.24 tons of organic matter cadmium per season to the rice fields in Sri Lanka. As against the chemical fertilizer, if you are using only urea, it will take 158 seasons, whereas 158 years. Whereas if you combine urea, DSP and MOP, it will take 12.5 years. So one thing you have to understand that the organic matter application is good, but excess application will lead to all these toxic things, which will be absorbed to the plant, and the food will not be safe enough for consumption. We looked at the heavy metal content in rice in Sri Lanka. You can see that some of these samples taken from Ampara, Munragal and all these things. This was done in, I think, 2016 or so. None of these exceeded the level that is required. That is the maximum permissible limits. Say, for example, cadmium 0.2. But there's one thing we have to remember. Even though this is lower, we are eating a lot of rice. We are eating 315 kilograms of rice per day per person. I think with the increasing flour prices now it has gone up. So that has to be taken into consideration. Whatever is said and done, this has to be reduced for further to make sure that we are eating safe rice. Our vegetables, it is the same. We are not in a very bad situation, but still there are many things that has to be done to make sure that we have healthy vegetables for consumption. It is true that if you look at the nitrate contents in the market, in green beans, it's about 192 ppm, but in the organic farms, it is about 1. Because in the organic fields, you know that nitrogen is deficient. The nitrogen amount which is given in is lower. So we have to make sure that this amount must go down. As I told you in my first slide, they use almost 4 times higher fertilizer than what is recommended. So this has to be stopped and make sure that even though the daily intake is not exceeding, you have to make sure that the nitrate level that you are consuming is lower. The acceptable nitrate intake limit is around 3.65 milligrams of nitrate per day per kilogram of body weight. And as I told you earlier, not only this, we have to make sure that our drinking water is safe. This is something which Dr. Priyantha and all did from Kalpitiya, where we all know that in the aquifer, the Kalpitiya soils, They use a lot of nitrogen because it's sandy nature. You can see that during the month of the time how this nitrate concentration goes up. This is not only this water level, but also because of the higher concentration of nitrogen fertilizer that is used in those sandy soils, the nitrate levels in those vegetables must also be much higher. I'm not going to go into detail on this. This is something which we have seen a lot of. It is of course is in lower area where eutrophication can take place because of this excess fertilizer usage. So all these are because of excess fertilizer usage. The pesticides we do analyze in the department. We are not in the danger zone. Only 1.07% of the samples did detect any amount of chemicals in this thing. Right? Say only one here less than 0.01 milligrams per kilogram, 3 of something of this thing, and this is the range. Of course, that this shows that we are still better, still safer, but we need to do something more on this. Again, the pesticide residues in the fruits and vegetables, which is done at Gandarwal, they are continuing to do this. This is not alarming, but must be one thing, something has to be done to make sure that these numbers are near zero in the future. So now this is about the past, the way forward towards self-sufficiency and a healthy nation. All these agriculture systems, you have to understand that you have to be vibrant enough. The system should be vibrant enough to produce enough food for both human and livestock. Food produced must be palatable and safe enough for consumer and must meet the minimum standards, as Professor Samarajee mentioned. And also the food, this should not further deteriorate its own growing environment, both below and above, and should remain in a better state for the future generations. And of course, we all know that it must be resilient to climate shocks and should perform other ecosystem services. It's not only for humans, but for other ecosystem services must be performed by these systems, agri food systems in this country, production systems in this country. To make this, whatever is said and done, we have to make sure that we must have enough food for people in this country. The only way to do is, we don't have enough land. We can't keep on adding fertilizer and agrochemicals to a larger extent of land. There's no way of other than increasing the productivity. This slide shows you that these are possible things. There's no need for us to do much on rice, but for maize, if we can increase the productivity, which is possible, from 3.87 to 5 tons per hectare. The land extent required will go down from 429,000 to 285,000 by just increasing the productivity alone. Along with that, there will be a less usage of fertilizer, less agrochemicals, and we can maintain that the product coming out of this will be safe enough for people to consume. To do that, there's a huge yield gap. Why I want to show this is, of course, by bridging the yield gap, you can increase the productivity. But we have to make sure that to control biotic stressors and the crop management practices, we use heavy use of agrochemicals for controlling weeds, pests, and diseases. And then for crop management options, we use a lot of fertilizer. So we have reduced the use of fertilizer and increased the input fertilizer use efficiency. And also we have to reduce the use of agrochemicals. So how to manage the biotic stressors pre and post harvest both? There must be an integrated pest and disease management. Otherwise, it will be difficult. As what we did for rice, we have to make sure that all resistant varieties for biotic stressors should be planted in this country. That is the only way we can reduce the need for agrochemicals. Or else, we have to make sure that whatever the other techniques that we are using to reduce the what you call damage by the pests and diseases. In that context, of course, I am not going to tell that what the other countries are doing, but I will show you in a moment another slide where US is going for GM crops. Many people are against it, but if you can accelerate the normal process which we use using the conventional methods of incorporating resistance, using these biotechnological tools, I think we have to do that, whether it's GM or not. We have to make sure that the resistant varieties for biotic stressors should be there with the farmers, and they should start cultivating. The second one is, of course, strictly adhere to agronomic management systems. So just rather than depending on agrochemicals, many are to adhere to agronomic management systems so that you can overcome that. So they are targeted biodistress management spray only for target chemicals and non-chemical. You use chemical and non-chemical means to these targeted pests. And use of novel methods of biotic stress control, biopesticides, biological control, using predators. Everything is there. Everything is there in the research and also with the researchers. But this must go to the farmers and strictly control agrochemical usage for both pre and post harvest operations. Now there is something going on under the discussion, like the antibiotics prescription-based usage system for highly toxic products must be there in the fixing, and also we must use new generation pesticides to make sure that mammalian and other toxic chemicals are out from the system. This is nothing new. We did this for rice. We did this for many other crops, like even for bean, books, resistant varieties are there. So there are so many. I'm not going to elaborate on this. This is available. This must go to the field. And this is about the vegetables. There again, the resistance is there. So we have to make sure that all these varieties of all these vegetables are being grown by the farmers in the future. These are what I'm going to say. These about the GM crops. Even though we are not growing GM, we are importing many GM varieties, like from US, where there is 93% of the corn is GM. Soybean, 94% is GM. We are importing many soybean, almost roughly about 250,000 tons of soybean cake to this country. So we have to think of it. We have to make sure that we are not going. If we are not going to go into GM, at least use biotechnological tools and increase the resistance of these varieties. The fertilizer issue, I'll quickly go through it. It is nothing but use integrated nutrient management packages, the precision farming technology packages to increase production while reducing the input usage, especially chemicals. We have to use the need-based fertilizer, agrochemical applications, and naval input management systems intact. The increased fertilizer use efficiency through supply or demand-driven major and minor elements. You apply only when it is necessary, not just blanket application. Use biological agents, new generation of varieties and technologies which can increase the symbiotic association of microbes. There are so many. So all these coupled with precision farming technologies should come in to increase the efficiencies as well as to protect the ecosystems with unwanted use of fertilizer. I'll just show you some 1 or 2 slides on the packages which is available. This is being used by farmers, where we can go up to 45 tons per hectare with hybrid chili, with sprinkler irrigation, precise management fertilizer and agrochemicals. So that means that we will be producing more food and safe food with all these precision management technologies, which should be there in the future with farmers in this country. Similarly, with drip irrigation in Chile, and that will reduce the cost of production. People think that it will increase the cost of production. No, because of the increasing in productivity from 20,000 tons to 45,000 tons, even though the cost is little higher, the product return to investment is much lower. So these are the packages that should go in, which will increase the production and increase the food safety with, because we are using less fertilizer and less agrochemicals. Same thing with onion. We don't need to spray huge amount of fungicides to control this, because it is being controlled with irrigation water. Drip irrigation is there to overcome those things. The same thing, the cost of production is going down. So at the end, the overall approach to provide adequate and safe food. Number 1 is to reduce biotic stress load, IPM, the integrated pest management for pest and disease management is the most important thing. We have to adhere to climate smart agricultural practices with cropping system approach, use resistant varieties and improved management technologies, and controlled and target application of agrochemicals. The IPM is an answer for that. And then to reduce the heavy metal loading and excess nitrates, use precision fertilizer application techniques, integrated plant nutrient systems. The lower fertilizer use with increased nutrient use efficiency, follow soil test based and demand driven nutrient management systems, better varieties with greater nutrient use efficiency, and use novel fertilizers. And then we have to minimize the pre and post harvest losses and maintain quality with no chemical residues. That has to be done either by testing it and warning the farmers or the producers about the chemical residues. The department is doing in a very, very small scale, but we have to make sure that a sizable amount of the sample will be tested and to assure that it is free of chemical residues. And assure the safe and quality agri-foods to local and export market with traceability. As Professor Samadhi said, traceability must be there so that at the end of the day, the consumer is getting a better product for his consumption. For all that, the holistic approach is to adapt precision good agricultural practices. That is there now. We are trying our level best in the Department of Agriculture, and I'm sure that the answer for all this increased productivity to make this country self-sufficient, plus to procure the consumer a safe food, it is the gap, the good agricultural practices in this country. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Virakon, for that informative presentation on the crisis as well as the way forward. In fact, now, because Dr. Virakon has to leave us for some important matters, we would like to open the audience for a short Q&A session with regard to the presentation of Dr. Virakon. Dr. Virakon, actually, I would like to start this Q&A shortly with whatever your views about the current ongoing yellow season and what would be the outcome of this current yellow season, as well as what we should be doing if we have already passed the threshold for planting rice paddy. And then what will be the needs for preparation for the next Maha season? What are your recommendations?
Well, the current yellow season is of course underway. As far as I got some information from the department, they have planted. The target is to plant roughly about 4,500,000 hectares of paddy. But this season, because of the shortage of fertilizer and agrochemicals, the farmers have gone only up to about 250,000 hectares. And which is also suffering from fertilizer because they could not supply the pledged organic matter also. So then there's a double burden thing. So we are, because of that, the production is expected to go down by 50%. There's no question about it. And we were told that the urea, which is pledged by the India, about 65,000 tons, will be arriving in another, say, 2-3 weeks time, 2 weeks time maximum, still not sailed from the port. But even it comes now, the Ampara and other areas they are harvesting. So it's but I was told is that there are some illegal things coming in. Fertilizer, of course, we don't need to worry very much, but the agrochemicals are, of course, a bit of concern. Some of these highly toxic chemicals which are not being used in this country are being used by farmers at exorbitant prices. So that is there, but Ampara district, the first to harvest, they are going to harvest, as I was told by the DG Agriculture, that the productivity is not going to be that low because they are getting all these stuff coming in. But for the rest of the country, there will be an issue. Even I'm right now working for FAO. We are trying to give some support, but still in a short period of time, it's not possible. at least we must try for the next Maha season where we want to salvage whatever this thing and then have a good Maha. For that, the seed paddy will be a crucial factor. So we have to make sure that we need roughly about 80,000 tons of seed paddy for 800,000 hectares. So we have to make sure that that seed paddy should be taken from this yellow house and preserved, because we cannot import seed paddy from other countries like us. And then the maize situation again, we need 1,200 tons of maize hybrids, which is being imported to this country to cultivate about 100,000 hectares. That has to be done, and that has to be there. So in overall, we had some other ensure that seed is available, and the fertilizer is available, and weedicides and other equipment is available. But when it comes to fertilizer and weedicides, I would rather say that not the full amount, at least 50% will be sufficient for with the crisis situation of this nature.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Veerappan. Professor Iresha has raised hand. Over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Veerappan,
Yeah.
just a very small clarification. Now,
Yeah.
in Sri Lanka, we have very bad experience of the government is getting misleading advice. I mean, to go forward with the agriculture systems, and now we are facing the repercussions of this misleading advice. Now, in this very decisive state, the Department of Agriculture, are you?
Professor Iresha, we can't hear you.
The connection was lost, I think.
Yeah, that's it. I think Professor Iresha.
You are muted, Professor Iresha. Can you come back again?
Okay. So you couldn't hear my question? Sorry?
No, we could not hear. Yes, you're muted.
Yes, sorry, my question is now we are having very bad experience in terms of the so-called scientists giving misleading advice to the government. And that is now where we are facing repercussions. Now, do you have...
Losing you at the right moment, probably.
Anyway, I will give some anticipatory answer, because I think he's asking what is the situation now.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, of course, we admit that because of the bad advice given by, I am reluctant to say take them as scientists. To bad advice given by some individuals and some of these clergy as reason to this situation. But right now, of course, now they have realized the bad part of it. But this is, of course, a very good platform for all of us to make sure that the safety issues are also taken into consideration. We all know that we are producing enough food, of course, but the heavy dose of fertilizer and agrochemicals. Fertilizer is free of charge, and there's no farmers are not foolish enough to add amount and get the maximum. So the dose of fertilizer subsidy, which is now been they are considering probably to revise it, should not be given as it was. Free of charge, unlimited amount of fertilizer should not be there in this country. That has to be controlled, and farmers should be supported, of course, no question about it. But that's what I said, the cap is the number one thing, where every farmer should be, at the end of the day, responsible for his own product. So we are trying our level best to promote with them and to bring all these farmers into this cap program, so that they will mentally also be adjusted to it, and also physically they will not apply chemicals and fertilizer. So I think as to answer direct to this Dr. Iresha's question, I think the current scientists are now giving the correct advice to the government, and now I hope the government will use it.
Yeah, I will open the floor for one more question before we go into the next presentation, because we are actually at 10:15. If there's any more questions, I would like to open the audience. Okay, since we don't have any more further questions, Dr. Veeragon, thank you very much for your informative presentation. And I'm sure we can take a lot from what you have said, and we will, of course, work on these things. Thank you again. Our next presenter, he will be talking about the production of animal-based animal-based foods. So to do this, I would like to actually introduce Dr. Sushil. So Dr. Sushil Silva is a graduate from the University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka, and a bachelor's degree in veterinary science, and obtained his doctoral degree in poultry nutrition from University of Newcastle upon Tyne in UK in 1997. In 2004, Dr. Sushil completed a 2-year spell at Harper Adams University in UK as a postdoctoral researcher in poultry nutrition. Dr. Sushil has served as a scientist for more than 25 years at the Department of Animal Production and Health in Sri Lanka, and was also the head of the Veterinary Research Institute of the department. He also held positions of Director Livestock Planning and Additional Director General at the Department of Animal Production and Health. Dr. Sushil has co-authored over 130 journal articles and conference proceedings, and was a recipient of many national and international research awards, including the President's Award. Dr. Sushil is well known among the livestock industrialists in Sri Lanka and has been working very closely with the poultry industry for over 30 years. He has also discharged many esteemed services to various professional associations in capacities such as the President of the Sri Lanka Veterinary Association, President World's Poultry Science Association of the Sri Lanka branch, the President of the and Registrar of the Sri Lanka Veterinary Council, to name a few. He loves sports and cannot be kept away from cricket. He is the only veterinarian in the history to have been awarded the best all-round sportsman of the year by University of Peradeniya. At present, Dr. Sushil is on no-pay leave, working as a head of animal utilization for Southeast Asia, United States Soybean Export Council. Over to you, Dr. Sushil.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right, thank you very much. Let me thank Institute of Food Science and Technology President and the Executive Council for inviting me for this important event commemorating Food Safety Day. I think it is very important topic. When I was asked to talk about current food crisis in Sri Lanka, situation management in animal-based food production, I was initially a bit reluctant because it's something very complex issue. I think good thing is Dr. Veeragon set a very nice scene for me to give some information about food crisis in Sri Lanka and way forward as well. Sorry, slides are not moving, I think. Hello?
We can hear you, Dr. Cecil.
All right, okay. Sorry, slides were not moving, right. Let's look at the business as usual, the current status, before the crisis. Animal production, the protein sources, we talk about milk, meat, especially poultry meat, and the eggs and fish. Those are the animal protein sources what we have been stored to fulfill the protein requirement of human beings. I think when there is a crisis, the amounts, the security will be threatened, and consequently first food safety will be threatened as well. So there is good reason for talk about this crisis in conjunction with Food Safety Day. Usually we produce about 230,000 metric tons of poultry meat, which is quite sufficient for us, and beef about 30,000 metric tons, and if you take all other meats into account, roughly about 10,000 metric tons. And milk, we produce about the 35 to 40% of the requirement or the demand, which is about 440 million liters. Out of that, roughly about 250 is collected. And eggs, we produce 2.9 to 3 billion or 3,000 million numbers. And fish production, what I have is 2018 figure, we produce about 550,000 metric tons of fish. Let's look at the food balance sheet based on data available published by the Census and Statistics. I think we are talking to food scientists in Sri Lanka. I think this is your subject, and the protein requirement is very important. Usually, for a basic food security, you need about 40 to 60 grams of, for minimum protein security, 40 to 60 grams of protein per person per day. According to the food balance sheet, we have that amount right now. According to the food balance sheet 2020, which is well below the crisis, I think they say we have access to 80 grams per person per day. Out of that, 25% is coming from animal products. But sadly, lot is coming from vegetable sources. But it is not the end of the world. We have sufficient amounts. But if you look at the animal protein component and what proportion is coming from the different sources, from meat, including chicken, it is about 4 grams of protein per day. Whereas with milk, it is more than what is coming from meat, 6 grams. I don't know how accurate these figures are, but I think this is the authorized body to publish statistics. And from egg, I believe we get about at least 2 grams a day, but according to the food balance sheet, we get 1 gram per day. And fish and seafood provides most, which is 11 grams of protein per person per day. So that's what we are. Now, let's see whether that is, that can be fulfilled by present supply. Let's take before the crisis, the MRI recommendation, I have seen this publication by the Minister, MRI, Medical Research Institute. They say for basic food security, they need, at least 140,000 metric tons of chicken meat. We produce well over that before the crisis situation. And eggs, unfortunately, they want us to produce 7.5 billion eggs. That is at least 1 egg per person per day to provide 6 grams from each egg. But at the moment, we produce only 1/3 of that. So there is a food security issue even before the crisis with eggs. And milk, again, they based on 100 milliliters per person per day, which is which is not quite sufficient. It is not what is food-based dietary guidelines says. But for basic food security, they want us to produce 750 million liters, but we produce about 430. If you take all other meats together, they want us to produce 90,000 metric tons, but unfortunately at the moment we don't even produce half of that. That is, I'm talking about before the this food crisis. And just to give you the GDP contribution of different sectors excluding fish, the poultry is the predominant the supply, which is very organized system, and that is one thing we need to look at separately. Let's see, are we anticipating a real food crisis, and would animal protein be hampered by that? and why. And we know lot. We all know why. We have had a lot of issues in the past. I think Dr. Veerakon elaborated very clearly, and Professor Iresha's question made him to give further explanation. I think we all know what has happened. I don't want to talk about that too much. But apart from that, there are some geopolitical realities that disrupt supply chains. And because of that also, we anticipate further food crisis in Sri Lanka. Invasion of Ukraine, we all know that caused a lot of problems to fuel supply, gas, and a lot of other, the supply chain disruptions happen due to issue of invasion of Ukraine. And with that and many other issues, I think we have a huge inflation, not only here in Sri Lanka, also in the global stage. Because of that, fuel prices are going up like hell, and gas prices, raw material prices, and even for for what is important for infrastructure and everything goes up. So that's a huge issue for sustenance of all the industries, and our industries in particular, because they are relatively import dependent. And also we all know there were COVID pandemic, and the aftermath of that, a lot of lockdowns. Some were necessary, some were not necessary. But since it was new, there were a lot of lot of things happen associated with that. I know I heard from my colleague that a lot of fertilizer factories in Russia, the shutdown because of these lockdowns. So I think we pay consequences of that. And then I think let's not talk about all the erratic political decision making happening in this country, which was unnecessary, and economic mismanagement, which has created to a serious issue now we are facing. I don't know, when you ask me to talk about way forward is a very tough preposition. Probably what I suggest is the general suggestions. It is so complex. Your guess may be as good as mine. What has resulted with all these geopolitical reasons, economic mismanagement, and also erratic decisions? Number one issue facing livestock sector is severe shortage of forex. That is the biggest issue. If you ask farmers, the industry, what are the problems you have? You want maize, you want that one. They say, no, we need dollars because we need to import certain inputs. Literally we can't import. That is one of the biggest issues facing the industry right now. And associated with that, we know the rupee is depreciated very badly, and because of that and all these inflation issues, there are high price of inputs, both local and imported. Say, for example, the last year or year before, probably Dr. Veerakon can remember, we split hair over whether to fix maximum retail price of maize at 40 rupees a kilo or 42 rupees a kilo, and later 50 or 55. Yesterday one farm informed me now maize price is 210 rupees a kilo. So can you imagine that? Then buy maize at 210 and produce egg, produce chicken. It's we are talking about local ingredients. And then all the industries, including livestock, especially poultry, depend lots on fuel, and fuel for many reasons, for distribution channels, and also when there are power cuts, you need generators to run, you need fuel, and then gas, for giving heat, they use a lot of gas extruders, you need gas, and then certain raw materials to come from outside or has to be grown locally. neither is happening at the moment because of the crisis. And then spare parts, even to get a, the one small spare, they have to struggle for dollars. So it's a very difficult thing. On top of that, because of the all inflationary issues, job losses, and all other associated issues, the poor purchasing power of the consumer is also there. Let's take one industry at a time. Usually poultry is very well organized, achieving very high standards, especially broiler sector, but relatively import dependent. But they have a huge potential for exports right now. There are, there is a food shortage overall in the region and in the world. Because of that, there are potential exports avenues opening up for the local industries. Good thing about the currency devaluation now, if they sell it for $2 a kilo, you get 700 rupees a kilo. And if you have 700 over the $2, and you can use that $2 to import your raw materials. Otherwise, you'd have taken those dollars from black market, maybe 450 rupees a dollar. So there is a business opportunity for certain segment of the industry to export and earn dollars to the Sri country, as well as for their own importation requirements. Dairy is slightly different. Usually dairy is mainly small scale, but there are some large scale production in Sri Lanka with some imported inputs. But for the small scale dairy, you need very little inputs, but supply chains has to be maintained. Fuel needs to be there for transportation of milk and many, but comparatively less import dependent. One of the way forward for dairy is to go with small scale, with limited inputs, probably all from local inputs, with very little from outside, and produce locality for local food security. Exporting dairy products is a the tough thing. You cannot even think about that. But it is I think dairy is one area we could concentrate more. Let's take before the crisis, we imported for entire livestock sector about 30 billion rupees worth of imported inputs. But to produce 130 billion worth of products, that is quite a good value addition. I think you should go for that sort of import 30 billion and convert that to 130 billion. So that's not bad. But now that may well not be the case, because the more and more input has to come from outside. The less input, especially feed is the biggest cost. Feed coming from local market is quite low, getting lower and lower courtesy of all the organic decisions made. And then I guess fish is the other thing that we could think about. But again, fuel, gas, and all the other disruptions may hamper the fish production as well. But these are areas that government should seriously look at. Let's carefully look at the the current state way forward. I think way forward, the expertise is not necessarily come from livestock, but it is business. I think there has to be a lot of discussions about way forward. Let's take poultry, dairy, pig, and fish separately. This is to give you a brief background of how chicken meat production is done in Sri Lanka. We call grandparent birds, all are with good genetics, are imported from outside Sri Lanka that need forex. 100% grandparents for chicken meat industry are imported, so that cannot be avoided. If you import a stock of grandparents today, you are setting entire operation for next 4 years. So you can't plan for 1 or 2 days. If government asks we don't need too much chicken today. So that had to be planned, the 4 years ago. Otherwise, you lose a lot of money for just disposing, the animal, very valuable stocks of animal. For that, we need to preserve food. And then in chicken production chain, it used to be, the based on imported parent birds. But now, good thing about 85% of the parent birds who produces day-old chickens are locally produced from imported grandparents. So that is a important thing. If you talk about volume reduction, I would leave that 15% imported parents birds out, just concentrate on locally produced parent birds. Now there are people who export day-old chicks and day-old chicks of parent birds. So that can create, the export avenues. There are people that volumes can go up under current scenario, because if you earn 4x, there is a lot of value for that. And then we produce broiler chicken from those commercial day-old chicks. And chicken meat, what we produce here in Sri Lanka, mainly standards are pretty good. We achieve very high standards, and also the quality and everything are good. The cost of production is a concern, but because of the devaluation of rupee, we can export to the especially Middle Eastern market. Otherwise, chicken has to come from either USA or mainly Brazil. Cheaper chicken is available in Brazil. To come from Brazil, the now container charges, shipping charges are very high, and also take a lot of time. People like to eat fresh chicken. From here, it may be a couple of days, but so that is one of the way forward to do a lot of exports and earn foreign exchange to pump into the local industry. And then fuel, gas, truck, some feed has to come from outside still. Egg production chain, egg is not as organized as chicken meat, but is still quite organized. But we don't have grandparent farms. We import parents, about 80,000 parents every year. But now what I heard is the crisis is they are cutting down importing parents, and also for the previous one, they are cutting down number of hatching eggs. What I heard is in layer, they have stopped, they have sent 25% of this important eggs used for day-old chick production go as table eggs, because no point producing chicks if there is no demand. So you spend a lot of money, cost of production maybe 80, 90 rupees per chick, that sells as a table egg for 30, 40 rupees. So that's difficult proposition. Table eggs, it's not quite easy, but there are some people who export. We also can think of exporting table eggs to earn some forex. In chicken, generally, what we are experiencing now is we anticipate there are about 25% shrinkage in broiler and layer as well. Layer sector, it is a lot more than that. But maybe in a couple of months, it will be a 50% shrinkage, because there is, there are a lot of disruptions and feeds are hard to come by. The biggest cost of this, of all the chicken operation, is the feed and feed requirement. Before the crisis, the Department of Animal Production and Health forecast for 2022, before the crisis, go to produce 1.4 million metric tons of animal feeds for different segments of chickens. To fulfill those feed requirements, out of the 1.4 million, 60%, 65% has to come from cereals, either cereals or cereal byproducts. The predominantly used cereal is maize, and then you can use rice, rice byproducts, then other cereals which we don't have, if we have to use, has to be imported. This is, the requirement for cereal and cereal byproducts is 900,000 metric tons. If we go business as usual before the crisis, maybe 600,000 or 500,000, after, some production drops in future. But when I look at the presentation of Dr. Veerakorn, I was shocked to see, the maize, we had 500,000 metric ton or 450, 500,000 locally produced at times. And even at a very higher productivity rate in 2008, 2009, we had a yield of 8 to 9 metric tons per hectare. Now we are talking about 3.7. And what I heard from some of my colleagues in agriculture after this fertilizer issue, that went down to 3.2. So those are the things I think collaboratively we can discuss, which are the things that we can produce, where we can source. If maize cannot be produced, if rice cannot be produced, no point. The animal industry is crying for maize and rice. Whether we can go for alternative raw materials. I know it is hard, but there is no choice. Need to look for local or alternative routes, whether you can use manioc. Manioc is not the most promising material to use in animal production. If there is nothing, that's something we can think about, but we need to discuss with agriculture colleagues whether you can do that, or are there any biomass which we can use, we can do research on. So those are the things we need to worry about. And then the protein sources, unfortunately, right now, most of the protein sources are coming from outside. The biggest one is soybean meal, coming from outside Sri Lanka. We out of the requirement, I think 90% is coming from outside because we produce very little soya. When I look at the crop forecast, I think maybe 1,000 hectares what we have cultivated, that is, barely sufficient to fulfill even 0.5% of the requirement. We require at least 200,000, but with time, with the crisis, we might say 150 is enough, maybe 125. All other material has to come from outside. But if there is a potential alternative to that is fish meal. Fish meal at the moment is coming from outside, the Scandinavia. But why can't we make our own fish meal? I don't know. It is maybe difficult. Fish itself is very expensive. Fish industry is also suffering from it. But maybe slightly compromising quality, we can produce a average quality fish meal and meat meal, and all the offals coming from animal industry can be rendered into offal meals. So those are the way forward that we can think about. And whatever the possible grains that Sri Lanka can grow with, with limitation what we have, so can be utilized. That has to be discussed. But now there is no choice, but we have to cut down operations. That's the sad story. For last 30 years, when I joined VRI, we had a very, basic poultry industry. Over the last 30 years, it developed into an extent, which par with all the standards in the developed world. But within 6 to 1 year, we are witnessing in our lifetime that is collapsing like a hell, which is very sad. But that's how everything is going. Just to this is probably not right with the figures shown by Dr. Veerakorn. This is the latest crop forecast published by the Department of Agriculture. You can see what is in yellow. In last Maha season, their production was 435,000 metric tons. But statistics can be quite inaccurate. At least we know we got at least 225,000 metric tons for the animal industries, but their prediction for this year with a 30% yield reduction is roughly 200,000. But I saw the Dr. Veerakon's presentation. The forecast is just over 100,000. That is confirmed by the Honorable Minister for Agriculture yesterday. He said if we get 120,000 metric tons of maize, that is lucky. I think hope Agriculture Department will revise this crop forecast based on ground realities. Dairy industry, I think I discussed this slightly. It's very important. The milk, if we can make milk available at affordable prices for the young children in this country, so that's very important under current circumstances, because all other protein sources are going to be unaffordable. But majority of the dairies with low inputs, and also good thing about dairy, which we cannot openly discuss within Sri Lanka, it can be the dual purpose. So you get milk, and also disposed animal can go for meat. If the meat is available, you get certain amount of that has to be legalized. Clearly legalized, then beef will be available a lot. And then goat farming is something that we need to concentrate on, because they can rely on very low input. Even the roughages that cannot be digested by large ruminants, the goat can live on that. So that's also other industries. Pigs at the moment, like poultry, they demand a lot of the high quality feed, but compromising certain production standards, we can go for low input pigs as well. I don't know whether
Sushil, so yeah, can we look at about another 2 to 3 minutes?
Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, fine.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Sushil. That was actually, you had looked at it from the point of view of the protein and the index. I believe there is quite a few questions that has also come in on the chat box, which we will address later. Now it is my pleasure to take us to the next presentation. We have a slight change in our format. We are bringing in Professor Iresha, because we thought that the need to modify the food systems and to address food safety would be more important at this time, since we have also already discussed on crop production and animal production systems. So then we are now discussing on the need to modify the food systems to address the food safety and face the current issues. This will be done by Professor Iresha, who is also the president of the Institute of Food Science and Technology. She's the head of faculty for the food science in University of Peradeniya. Over to you, Professor Iresha.
Thank you, Mr. Dhammika. Now, our crisis is, very bad. So just now my computer, the battery went off. So I have to, get the support of Professor Samrajiva in sharing my slides. Hope all of you can hear me and can see me. Right.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dhammika. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Having listened to three earlier speakers, now we can understand the gravity of the problem that we are facing. And also, if we try to understand the challenge we have ahead, that is attaining food security in the country. So very soon we'll be going, even now we are facing and experiencing hunger and starvation. And very soon we'll be moving, very high percentage of people will move into malnutrition. So with that very, negative statement, I'll be moving to the positive way of handling the situation and talking about need of modifying food systems to address food safety and to face the current food crisis. Next slide, sir. So what affected the Sri Lankan agriculture resulting in food insecurity? So I don't have to explain the situation, but we all know it is based on the question I asked from Dr. Veerakona as well. That is the unscientific way of giving advice and unscientific decision making. So we are now facing the repercussions of this type of very bad. Give me a minute. I'm sorry. So now we are facing a very bad situation in our agriculture because of this very bad decision making. So next slide, please. Yeah. So what went wrong? Now, if we look at the very the Gazette notice, was the reason for all these the situations that we are facing right now. There is ban on the import of agrochemicals, especially the fertilizer and all the other pesticides. So affected badly, and so because of this situation, the surge in food prices, and also the farmers are not ready to face the crisis. So the production, the agricultural production is drastically reducing, and now we are facing the situation where we can't find the basic food needs from the markets. Next slide. Talking about food security and food safety, the link between, and what we encountered the very serious situation in the country because of the people could not very clearly understand the link between food safety and food security. So as I said, the food safety must be an enabler but not an inhibitor of food security. And also I discuss about the evolving concept of food security, and now we are focusing not only on the sufficiency in major staples, but also we are talking about and considering about the food preferences, and also what are the requirements of food to lead active and healthy life. Now we are facing a shortage of food currently in Sri Lanka. Now, in a situation we are facing a food shortage, so what would happen to food safety? Because our now main focus is to accomplish or attain food security. But can we just sacrifice food safety in a food shortage situation in the country? But definitely no. So we need to definitely balance food safety and food security. So in analyzing the risk, so when we analyze the risk of the current situation, definitely we need to take into consideration both the risk of starvation, risk of undernutrition, and also the risk of the food safety that might arise and leading to have severe foodborne illnesses. So definitely we have to consider integrating food safety into the food aid that we'll be using very soon, and also food and security nutrition intervention, and also hunger emergencies. So without considering food safety, we will go for very bad shape in the future. Therefore, it is a must to consider. Now, the topic that would be covering, the main aspects that would be covering the food systems approach in agriculture. So it's the very common approach in the world. So especially the UN, emphasizing the need of enabling sustainable food systems to deliver healthy and sustainable diet. So what is, in simple terms, what is a food system? It's the entire range of actors and also activities. So deals with primary production and processing, distribution and consumption. So it not only focus on the crop production, but also the livestock, forestry, fisheries, and also food industries. And we are thinking in broader terms of economic, societal, and also considering the impacts to the natural environment. So this is a definition given by FAO. So are we in a position right now to think about the sustainable agriculture, or just to survive with what we have right now? Even though we are facing issues, so we will not be facing it forever. So we have to have a very balanced approach while managing the risk. We need to be ready to have a good agricultural systems for us to survive in the future. So these are the action tracks identified by the UN Food Systems Summit, which was held in 2021 May, and these are the five major action tracks. The first one, the ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all. The second one, shift to healthy and sustainable consumption patterns. Boosting nature positive production, advancing equitable livelihoods and value distribution. And the fifth one, building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stresses. So these are the action tracks that they have come up with, and you can understand it. The action track one very clearly emphasized the link between food security, food systems, and the food safety. So it is very important that we are always embedding food safety into food security. So in order to implement these action plans, they have suggested some innovations in food systems. So these innovations talk about some sort of transformation. So if we look at in brief, so the first one, to end hunger and increase the availability and affordability of healthy diets and nutritious food. So that's our focus. It is the focus of the every nation as well as in Sri Lanka. So that is becoming very serious in the current context. And de-risk food system. So definitely in terms of food safety, we should not have the risk the coming from the known food hazards. So we have to use advanced science, and also it emphasizes the traditional food systems, the traditional food system knowledge to be used in order to reduce risk coming from food systems. So we have to overcome the inefficient ways of managing food systems, and we have to go for the inclusion, empowerment, and of different stakeholder groups, especially the women and youth, even in some countries giving emphasis to the indigenous people. And also the bioscience and digital innovations to improve the health of people, because the public health is a very important consideration in these the action plans. And in implementing, we have to have some innovations to ensure the public health. So the regeneration, so the sustainability is a very important aspect in food systems. Now we are not very much emphasizing on the productive soils. That's where, most of the time we went wrong. So therefore, the good practices become a very important phenomenon to go forward. So it is also highlighted in this UN focus. And sustainable fisheries, aquaculture, and the protection of coastal areas are of concern, and engineering and digital innovation. So here the UN focus is, coming up with innovations to support the transformation of food systems. In Sri Lanka now, we need a very collaborative approach, but it need to be highlighted that this collaborative approach need to be backed by science, because we can understand where we went wrong. So as I said earlier, the misleading the information, misleading advice to the government and all the other decision-making bodies, resulted a very chaotic situation in the country. So therefore, we have to have a very collaborative approach backed by science in facing the current situation. So we have to understand what are the very important ways that we have to fight the current situation. So the first approach would be the national level decision making to increase food production and processing. So without the national level decision making, without the national level management and the support, so we are not in a position to move forward. So what are the things that need to be done from the top level decision making? So we have to have agricultural policies to match with the current situation to enable us to face the crisis. Now, in such a case, the priorities need to be given to support the provide financial support to agriculture. But currently, there are so many other the priorities where we are the poor people are facing and undergo starvation and hunger leading to malnutrition. So it is very necessary that we decide on at least some amount of fertilizer importation to not to have the starvation of the majority of the Sri Lankan. And maybe it is possible for us to go for the using abandoned lands. So it is because usually what we are focusing is that intensification of the current lands. But in this current situation, maybe it is possible for us to go for use of abandoned lands. So as I emphasize, we have to have a food system approach where all the stakeholder groups, that is actors and activities are very well collaborated and the information flow is very well managed, where we take the outcome based decision making. So in that scenario, it is very important that we go for good practices, especially good agricultural practices. Now I'm not emphasizing on this organic agriculture, which is a very good focus, but we were trying to go for organic agriculture without a focus, without considering on this the food security. So therefore, it is possible for us to first start with good agricultural practices, and in the processing, secondary processing, good manufacturing practices and good hygienic practices as a food system approach in a collaborative manner. So in that sense, farm to fork approach would be very important in ensuring food safety. And it is very important to have planning to reduce post-harvest losses. Now, even in this crisis, some food commodities are surplus in the production. Example, pumpkin. But we are not having ways and means to reduce post-harvest losses by ensuring better supply and distribution. So we have to have decision making coming from top level for these type of means. And improving household food availability would be a very important aspect, because right now we have to move towards maybe cottage level, or maybe the gardening house level gardening in order to satisfy our needs. So in that case, but the policies should come from the government in order to improve household food availability and identifying potential crops to expand cultivation. Now, as Professor Samarajiva very clearly said, the risk associated with the consumption of manioc, but it's the potential crop to expand. But knowing the food safety issues and knowing how to be prepared for the issues and how to prepare it in order to reduce the hazardous situations. So we have to understand, and the government should support this type of decision making. And promoting cottage level processing and preservation. I'll be emphasizing it in another slide. And also effective distribution and transportation is a very important fact, because in Sri Lanka we have a very poor the supply chain management, and the distribution important issue to be, which needs the support from the government and reduce food waste. So if I briefly look at the requirements in improving the better distribution, now we have to connect the small scale producer to the markets. But that is the way that we need to improve supply chains. Now these markets need to be accessible by the consumers. And also, like in the address given by Dr. Gangal, WHO, the regional head, the region is now emphasizing on traditional markets, wet markets for sure. In the future, we have to move forward with this, the traditional and wet markets, but we have to handle it with very carefully in terms of handling food safety. But it is a way of, having better distribution of the commodities required for the consumers. And we can use some public distribution systems. Now I remember there was a proposal given to the IFSTSL, which was mainly handled by Professor Samarajiva. There was the proposal where to use the Sri Lankan railway use to distribute the commodities, especially fruits and vegetables. But these type of things are not taken seriously by the government, but these are very possible tasks to be achieved. And also, in order to reduce the post-harvest losses and improve the distribution, we have to go for whole food chains. And if the resources are not enough, so maybe we can get the support of the supermarket chains, and also they can have the connection and the contract basis assistance to, especially to producers, to maintain required quality and safety. So that is the national level approach, and the approach too would be to promote the utilization of alternative foods and their preservation. So we have to look for alternative food items, because most of the major the food commodities that we are currently enjoying would not be available for us because of the production reduction in the country. So therefore we have to go for alternative food items, and also cottage level maybe food preservation and processing. So we have to promote short duration crops. So otherwise we can't stay for long having starvation and hunger. And also we have to go for healthier crops, and crop diversification is a requirement in the current situation. So we can move for simpler preservation techniques of this type of short duration crops. And also we have to identify the underutilized food crops, especially the crops like jack, breadfruit, and traditional yams are the focuses. And we have to go for home gardening and the preservation of surplus, as I told you earlier, pumpkin, and also seasonal fruits like avocado, mango, and we can go for simpler processing methods like pickling, fermentation, and drying in order to fulfill our the continuous supply of food to mitigate starvation and hunger. And also animal protein sources would be the issue, because there will now Dr. Susil very clearly showed you what will happen to the livestock sector, and therefore we have to go for the alternative animal food protein sources. So if I tell the names, that would not be very appealing to you. So if I talk about the animal pest of agriculture, so just to give you some examples, wild boar, maybe deer and peacock, maybe even monkeys, those are animal pests of agriculture. Who knows, maybe we have to go for such alternative animal protein sources in the future. And promoting inland fisheries which are not fully explored, And also the government should support free-range rearing of poultry birds, so the birds can be supported to the rural area. So the ruralization would be a approach in fulfilling the animal protein for us in the future. So one other approach would be the promoting good practices, as Dr. Veerakon very clearly emphasized. So we were using fertilizer without any scientific move, and we didn't know the levels, and that was the main the problem that resulted all of these the issues that we are currently facing, because people were highlighting the use of agricultural chemicals and not focusing on food security. So we have to learn it from the past, and we make it the current situation opportunity to develop ourselves, especially improving the agricultural system. So application of agricultural chemicals need to be done in a very scientific manner, understanding the application, the timing of application, and the timing of taking yields after application. So the good practices need to be adhered in application of agricultural chemicals. And also sustainable agricultural production. So we have to think about good practices in managing soil, managing irrigation, and also we have to emphasize again about this naturalism, talking about the natural diversity, and also the crop diversity is a very important concern. And especially the good agricultural practices should be the basis for efficient production. Now, even if we go for the production without the food safety aspect, so maybe the people who are right now having hunger and starvation with less immune systems, the bodies, so therefore they are very prone to get the diseases. So therefore we have to have a proper thinking and focus to ensure food safety and follow good agricultural practices. So in moving forward with this, all these what we are proposing, so we have to have a very collaborative approach. So the people who are having the knowledge, the people who are using science should come forward, and would be the way for us to move forward in managing the risk currently we are facing. So it is true that the set of people, even from the universities, came forward, and others did not know what they were proposing, what they were, advising to the government and all the other decision making agencies in Sri Lanka. So therefore it is very necessary we follow a very collaborative approach, not groups. So it is not characters. We have to go as a team. Now all the especially the universities having agricultural faculties, they have to get together. Even right now the Faculty of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya, is in the process of developing a proposal to be forwarded to the government. But it should be more than that. It is all universities should come forward, get together, and decide on what are the possibilities of mitigating the current situation in the country, and we find the effective ways of facing food security insecurity. So with that, let me give you a message to be taken to your minds in this current situation. So we have to understand, even though the food security is the current major concern in Sri Lanka, the access to safe food is a very important aspect to be embedded in current moves that we are taking to ensure food security. So food safety would contribute to food security and enhances nutritional benefit because it's a public health priority. Understanding the link between food safety, nutrition, food security, we have to modify food systems to face the current food crisis. So in facing the current food crisis, we have to have national level approaches, and also we have to focus on the household or cottage level production and processing, and definitely the involvement of science and knowledge communities is a must to handle and face the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Irisha. Despite all the hardships we went through on the technical side, you were able to give us a proper presentation with all the facts and figures and the need for a collaborative approach to mitigate the crisis and the way forward. I believe, Professor Irisha, you will be sharing Dr. Shanmugaraja's presentation.
Yes, give me a minute.
So let me introduce Dr. Shan, who is a medical doctor by profession. He's MBBS and a diploma in family medicine. Has a certificate post in healthcare management from Boston, USA. Dr. Shan has been a member of the Food Advisory Committee of the Ministry of Health from 2016 to date. So quite an experienced person in the area of food safety and on the ministry activities. Dr. Shan will be today talking to us on the role of national food control and the competent authorities in assuring food safety amid the current food crisis in Sri Lanka. So Dr. Shan was also a member of the National Steering Committee for Policy Development, Ministry of Environment, and also a member of the National Steering Committee and Environmental and Natural Resources for the development of National Environmental Action Plan, and responsible for the Environmental Health section of the National Environmental Action Plan. He was also the Secretary of the National Steering Committee on Hospital Waste Management, chaired by Secretary of Health, and responsible for developing policy guidelines, action plans, and program development for conducting training and on clinical waste management for hospital waste. He's also a member of the Basel Convention on transboundary movement of hazardous waste, responsible for developing guidelines on hazardous waste management of the Environmental Ministry. He's also a member of the task force. Actually, his CV is quite long. I'm actually picking out the salient points that is relevant to us because it runs for several pages. So I think he has also done quite a lot of training programs, workshops, seminars, and conferences since 1982. And he has communications and presentations also runs into several pages. So I think it's now time for us to listen to Dr. Shan on the role of the food control. Yeah, Dr. Shan would today would be discussing on the role of the national food control competent authorities in assuring food safety amid the current crisis. So it's all about food control systems and the competent authorities. Dr. Shan, you okay?
Yeah, I am waiting for the.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll straight away move on to my presentation. We have listened to some eminent speakers, and Professor Samarajiva's presentation. The highlight was the how the community will seek alternatives and the dangers in it. And also we have listened to the current situation in the plant-based food and animal-based food production. And also we listened to Professor Irisha's presentation on what is the ideal way of having a food system and also how should be modified to meet this present crisis. So my role will be to discuss on the competent authorities, how they will be assuring the food safety amidst the current crisis. Next slide, please. Yeah. I will be starting on a little pessimistic note, but we know that of the economic crisis, and we may be entering into a recovery phase which may even last for 2 to 5 years, and even the impact may even we can see for decades. And we will be having resource constraints in terms of money, material like equipments, chemicals, reagents, raw materials, ingredients, like recruitment, training, capacity building. All those will be facing a lot of stress, and technical support, even collaboration, coordination, meetings, risk analysis, research, dissemination information. So, and this all put the current food safety management system under duress, and we may have to find ways how. Hello. Hello.
Please go ahead, Dr. Shan.
How best we can utilize the available resources with minimal inputs, so that we can optimize the resources and to prioritize a practical, implementable, and low-cost intervention approach, and so that we achieve some amount of food safety in this country. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'll be addressing this under 3 areas. One is the export foods, imported foods, and the locally produced foods, because all 3 has different approaches in management. Next slide, please. Now, export foods, it's a forex earner, so we had to be more focused on that. The current system has the Food Authority being the Codex contact point, and they have the SPS Secretariat. The TBT focal point is the SLSI, and the Department of Commerce is the focal point for WTO. So they have some arrangements, the Codex Committee, and also the SPS Secretariat, where they send notifications to the WTO, as well as answer any issues when there is a WTO concern. Here we had to see that the liaison with the Department of Commerce takes place periodically, at least quarterly, and with other stakeholders, because we will be definitely having a lot of problems under this crisis. And with regard to rejections, compliance to importing country requirements, and also when new proposal comes in, we had to represent it in the Codex for acceptance, and also we had to answer WTO concerns. So it's a collaborative effort where the Food Authority has to play a very crucial role and a collaborative role. And unfortunately, this is not happening regularly now. So the Food Authority has to concentrate on this aspect and see that there are regular meetings which happens and they can address these issues. And also we will be having a lot of problems with the testing facilities, because the government sector will be facing all these constraints. So I think the Food Authority, all these days they have been more reliant on the government sector, but I think it is time that they must explore the accredited testing facilities in the private sector, and also have some arrangements to see that there are quality and checks, and also the accreditation is valid. The Food Authority issues health certificates, but again, this has to be more streamlined, bringing in system certification and risk-based categorization of food in order to ensure a better way of issuing health certificates, because although there are other agencies like for export in the fisheries sector, the fisheries, the Tea Board, the Coconut Development Authority, they are responsible for certain export products, and some governments and agreements, they recognize their product certification, but still many governments depend on National Food Authority. They are issuing of certificates. So the Food Authority, it is time that they had to look into it and improve the way they are issuing health certificate, because this will affect our export foods and the revenue which comes from there. And I feel that if the Food Authority can, the officers doing a hard work and dedicated, and with little skills improvement, they will be able to do this job. And therefore, in my opinion, the current resource constraints will not give a much impact on this area. Next slides, please. Under the imported food, again, under the Food Act, the Food Authority is the sole authority for maintaining food safety for all imported foods. So the Food Authority has to have, because there is a supply and demand challenge now, the Food Authority has to look at how best to have a balanced approach in clearing these consignments and expedite their clearance. Now, we know that there are a lot of delays in sometime clearances, and demurrages are there. Unfortunately, what the industry or the trade sector experiences is passed on to the consumer. So therefore, we have to see that we don't put further burden on the consumer. So by putting a better balanced approach, so for that, the customs has a Asikuda system, that is automated system for customs data. It's a fairly globally accepted clearance system. We had some discussions with the customs. I think if the Food Authority can utilize this system for pre-market clearance, once a consignment is placed, they should be able to look at the pre-market screening, and they need not wait till the product consignment arrives at the port, and there they make a decision whether to reject or give approval for release. So I think it is high time the Food Authority has to look into this utilization of the Asikuda system in a more diligent way. Then again, there is a controversial aspect with the SLSI, because SLSI has an inspection scheme, a mandatory inspection scheme for conformity to their own standards. And what happens is, if the Food Authority also utilize, they also implement their scheme. Actually, they are using the common resource of the public resources. So I think it is high time, because the SLSI will not give in on giving up this import inspection scheme. So it is high time the Food Authority look into it, have a working arrangement with the SLSI. During my time, we had a working arrangement with the SLSI so that we don't duplicate matters and we complement to each other, so that the current resource constraints are not further stressed upon. The another way of looking at the current crisis is to introduce a pre-market approval system for selected foods. Now, dietary supplements is a $6 billion industry, and sometimes the market is flooded with a lot of dietary supplements which consume the foreign exchange, and these are not needed for our population. And also, under the current crisis, where the purchasing power is poor, I think we had to have some amount of control, regulatory control, and dietary supplements. So a pre-market approval system is very essential, as well as for milk-based products, additives, and things like that. So this will reduce the burden on the Food Authority for increasing the market surveillance. So, and also in this context, I think the Food Authority has to look at amending certain HS codes with the customs, maybe subcodes may be necessary to meet the emerging needs as well as to avoid ambiguity. And also the compliance to regulatory requirements on food safety and labeling on the imported foods. And it is again, it has been noted that what we operate, the Food Authority operates is under a very ancient law, is 1980. And the Food Act of 1980 only emphasizes on the end product safety. And that is not a very good way of looking at the food safety for a risk-based food safety management system. As the previous speakers have said, it is a farm-to-fork approach, where there is a lot of collaboration with other sectors and disciplines has to be involved. And the Food Authority has to take a very active role in this. So the putting out regulations is a really cumbersome procedure, but still the Food Authority has to see that the regulations are updated. I think the Food Act also has to be at least amended, because although the food safety policy says the stipulates a food safety authority and a new system of approach, but it may not be possible at the current juncture. So what I recommend is at least to amend the Food Act to meet certain essential requirements, which can be done without even there is a resource constraint. Next slide, please. Now, the locally produced foods, I will look into under these four key areas. One is good practices, the hygiene, market surveillance, and consumer resilience. Now, under the good practices, there are already some speakers have already spoke to us, where I will not be talking on all the agencies, but I have taken only 4 agencies which covers the major part of the food production. So the Department of Agriculture, where the key messages will be the good agricultural practices by farmers has to be maintained and encouraged, and the Agriculture Department has to see that GAP certified products enter into the consumer market, and also they have to periodically share information with the Food Authority to ensure food safety and take corrective action when necessary with regard to certain issues found when they are administering the agricultural good practices. Then the Department of Animal Production of Health, again, some of the key points are that good animal husbandry practices and good veterinary practices to ensure food safety in animal-based product to the consumer. So this has to be, again, even there is a crisis, we have to see that this goes on. And also the Department of Animal Production and Health has a crucial role to play in inspection and certification of meat and meat products, milk, eggs, fish, honey, honeybee, bee honey, tallow, lard, gelatin, and for absence of food safety hazards and safe human consumption. I think although technically the Food Authority has a say in the end products safety and things like that, but still, if you are looking at the farm-to-fork approach, I think the Animal Production of Health has a crucial role to play. And also, again, there must be a very good collaboration, and some mechanism should be in place to see that periodically they discuss on matters related to animal health and food safety, and also jointly take corrective action and prevention of such hazards. Next slide, please. Then again, Department of Export Agriculture, it covers the spices. I think although it is concerned with the export market, but still it also covers the domestic consumption. So they have to ensure that food safety requirements are met through planned management of post-harvest handling, and also provide process certification information and product certification information to the Food Safety Authority in the issue of health certificates for exports. Share information with Food Authority on incidences of food safety hazards in the market products. And this is another example where the Food Safety Authority has to collaborate with other agencies so that their burden of individually going and repeating all these things can be minimized, and they can concentrate on how best to maintain a risk-based food safety management system. Again, the Coconut Development Authority, they also have to ensure food safety of coconut kernel products through process certification and product testing, because they maintain registration of all manufacturers, and it is renewed annual. And also they have to share the quarterly reports with the Food Safety Authority on incidence of food safety hazards in products for export and local market. So that again, there will be some sort of information on certain hazards and risks. So the Food Safety Authority will be able to look into it in a more constructive way and collaborate with other agencies and prevent or ensure food safety. Next slide, please. And the hygiene aspects, I think the food handlers and the food handling establishments play an important role in this. And unfortunately, a manual was prepared, food handlers manual, but still it is not in the print. And so training has to be done. So I hope the WHO, some other organization, they may be able to provide funds. Hello? Yeah, there's some interruption. And also we have a registration of food premises regulation, especially for freshly cooked food, and that has to be implemented and enforced. And we have an H8 rating form, which is voluntary, but it is a motivating form where the food establishments are graded, so that and the certificate is displayed in their shops. So it is a way of motivating them. But the registration of food premises is a regulatory procedure, so we can ensure hygienic practices in these premises. Then again, it is time that we have to bring GMP at least mandatory for all small-scale industry. Otherwise, we may not be able to enforce food safety in many of these places. And HACCP also mandatory for medium-scale industry, large-scale industries. Of course, they already have. Many have ISO 22000 systems. The only problem is we had to develop a criteria for categorization of small scale and medium scale industries in order to make a mandatory directive in the form of regulation. Next slide, please. We come to market surveillance. Although under the modern risk-based food safety management system, market surveillance has a lesser role to play, but still it is important. But under the current crisis, this is something I think we have to ensure, because with the crisis, there will be a lot of adulterated, substandard products, and also the likelihood of contamination to occur in the end products. So we had to, the food authority has to prioritize, because considering the constraints faced by the testing facilities, authority has to look into the sampling plans based on consumption patterns and food safety risks. And also they had to plan now if a testing facility, if a particular category of food is sent, all the areas are sending to a testing facility, then it's easy for them to concentrate on that, because the cleaning, calibration, reagents, all these can be looked into. But now what is happening now is a haphazard way of sending the samples. So one testing facility have different samples which they have to undertake. So it is time the food authority has to prioritize and look into in the backdrop of the resource constraint. Then again, the analytical facilities, the food authority, we have a prejudice that private sector may not be that reliable, but I think under the current crisis, we have to see that the private sector also recognized, and they had to be accredited facilities. And also, they had to work in the government laboratories and private laboratories in order to optimize the resources. And also, they must have some sort of input from all the analysts, including the private sector, so that they can look into the trends in certain the food safety hazards and take preventive action. Again, there are food labeling and color coding regulations. This is also important because under the current crisis of where people have difficulty in purchasing power, the people can be easily cheated, or there will be misleading information on the label or advertisement. And also the color coding helps in for a better choice. Then again, we have to look into the third-party recommendation and rating system for food manufacturers. The only third-party recommendation which we have, which is more reliable, is a SLS mark. But I think it is time that although the under the Food Act, there is a guideline, the labeling regulations accept the third-party recommendation, we have to look into it and work, make certain arrangements and make some sort of plan. They develop, and also there are a lot of confusion and overlapping with the activities of the Consumer Affairs Authority, Coconut Development Authority, Tea Board, Fisheries, SLSI. So fortunately, recently, Professor Samarajiva and Professor Iresha, I was also involved. They have, with the greatest effort, they have developed a lot of the standard operating procedures for many of these agencies. I think it is high time they look into it and promote the adoption of these SOPs so that they understand their role well, and also the overlaps are reduced, and their collaboration and effort can be maximized. Next slide, please.
Professor Shan, Dr. Shan, sorry, I think can we?
Okay.
We are now about 5 minutes to 12.
Go to it. This is one or two slides only.
Okay.
1 or 2 slides. So we are talking about a consumer resilience. Resilience is that is individual ability to bounce back from stress and trauma, and we know the consumer attitudes are proportional to the resilience. That is, if there is a resilience, there will be a negative attitude. So we need a holistic approach to understand the consumer resilience, and also we have to promote self-reliance, nutrition, and mental health. And mental health, next slide, please. Next slide. Mental health is not absence of psychiatric illnesses, but is something more, mental well-being. I will not go into it at this stage. So a lot of us don't take mental health into account because it is not like trees, watered and some nutrients. Man is a complex life form. So there are other issues which are concerns, or just giving rice, not with will not solve problem. And also we had to look at home gardening, and also how to build a food plate. We are talking about home gardening, but we don't give them good messages. Because I remember when I was a Moj, we had a diagrammatic presentation where how different plots within a 400 square feet, how the different crops can be grown, or alternatives, options, and things like that. And we all know organic content of soil will increase water retention. So look at how we give the message. And also the next slide, please. Okay. Now this is one way of looking at the how the messages are given. Now this is a dietary guidelines give a pyramid where how a diet should be taken. But an average person won't understand this. The next slide, please. Okay, look at this. Now, this is a United States Department of Agriculture. They have put out this. They give different options. So, average person can see. Okay, if I had to take fruits, sorry, fruits, what is the options I have to take? If the dairy-based one, what is the option? Protein, vegetable. So this is a type of message we have to give. And even home gardening, we had to give that message. And even tree planting, we had to make the person aware that is an investment. So with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you for the listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shan. Very informative presentation, and it's a very critical time that we are looking at the control systems while during a crisis. But I believe there is a silver lining, because you can put a lot of things in place during a period like this, and it is quite vital that we do this. Now, I think this is not the real end of the presentations, but I think it's now time for us to get the input from Professor Dr. Safumal Dhanapala, who is currently the specialist in public health, working as a national professional officer at the World Health Organization, and is responsible for emergency risk management, which includes food safety. He was previously working as a specialist at the Food Control Safety Unit at the Directorate of Environmental and Occupational Health of the Ministry of Health. Dr. Sapumal Dhanapala will be discussing the role of multinational agencies in food safety.
Thank you very much, Dhammika. I hope you can hear me well and you can see the slides. Iresha, can we have the full screen? Okay, so my task is a bit more easier than the lady and the gentleman before me, in the sense that I have to step back and give you a little bit inputs of how the food safety systems have evolved globally, and of course the roles of WHO and the other key international organizations. And today marks the World Food Safety Day. And I would like to thank Professor Resha and her colleagues at IFSTSL for organizing this webinar and inviting us also to be a partner. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Iresha. Iresha, the slides are not moving. Okay. So if you look at the global news, you'll find that the previous one, please. Is this the second slide? Resha, is this the second slide or the previous slide? Resha? Extremely sorry about the slides. Not. Resha, is this the second slide?
Sekresha seems to be having another issue.
Yes, I think there's a glitch in the uploading of the presentation. Most probably a power cut or something, most probably in Candy.
Probably. Professor Samarjeev, would you be able to come in at this moment? I'm really sorry, Dr. Sapal.
That's quite okay. These are all part and parcel of this IT hits. Damika Irisha said she was disconnected and she's coming online again.
Okay, no problem. Okay, understood. In the meantime, I think we have gathered quite a lot of questions coming in through the chat box. I think we would like to encourage you all to keep on doing that because we are gathering up all the questions. Yeah, some more coming in because we need to have time to address all these things also. Dr. Danapala, I suppose Professor Samarjeev is now.
Did you get it?
Yes, can see you. Thank you very much, sir. So if you look at the, sorry for the interruption. So you can see, if you look at the global newspapers, you can see that sometimes food is identified as a key issue. And there is also a lot of headlines being created because of salmonella in eggs, or even in infant formula being taken back, etc. So this is something that is globally a public health issue that is being looked into and addressed by many. And when the consumers are very knowledgeable, and they also look into these type of events which have been reported in other countries. And also quickly it trickles down to the food authorities in each country, and food control administrators are then asked what they have done in this particular area of this. Next slide, please.
Just a second. That also got stuck. Oh.
Yes, sir. So if you look at the food safety issues as mentioned by most of the speakers before me, you can see it's a very complex matter where you are looking at the mycotoxins issues, pesticides, GM food, foodborne bacteria, drug residues, allergens, quality of sanitation, and also diseases of plant or even animal. And it's a complex issue that involves the industry, trade, and of course the consumer. Next slide. And also, like I mentioned earlier, this covers click the enter button, sir. So you can see that it looks into food safety issues. It talks about the countries which are identified, and of course the particular safety issue that also is being addressed. Next slide. And also, if you think of the food safety in a broader perspective of the sustainable development goals, you can see that if you do invest in food safety, there will be rewards in also in the achievement of the SDG 2, when it talks about food safety. Second one is SDG 3, which is on health. Of course, as all of us are aware, food safety also affects the health of individuals. SDG 12, when it talks about the food safety along the sustainable pathways. And SDG 17, which talks about cooperation across the sectors, is the best way is to ensure food safety. Even today's seminar, you will see that there is a wide range of speakers from animal sector, agriculture sector, from Dr. Shamugaraja, who was a former director of the Food Control Administration Unit, and of course the academia, where Iresha also raised certain issues. So the industry all need to look into these areas, because if we need to achieve these SDGs, we need to then invest in food safety for future. Next slide. Just to show how the environment and food safety go hand in glove. So you can see that if there's environmental pollution, if there's taken place in a country or in a situation in a place, that will affect the food chain and also affect the safety issues. While if there is a food safety issues, which also can affect the environment. Just to show the food safety environment, the linkages, and also how it affects the human health when it comes to overall. So if it comes to human health is affected by environment, and also food safety also affects the human health. So overall, if we don't look at our environment and food safety issues, people will not be safe with threats from the food that we consume. Next slide. So what are the key roles of the UN agency which play a key role when it comes to food safety? As all of you are aware, you have heard of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, where WHO and FAO are the key partners there. And it's both organizations work hand in glove to ensuring food is made safe. It's a complex process that starts on the farm, as many of the speakers told before you, and ends with the consumer. So it's not only the FAO and WHO which will need to provide inputs and support to member states. It also needs to have the OIE and also the plant health partners as well. So through complementary mandates of WHO and FAO, we cover a range of issues to support global food safety, and which in turn protects the consumer's health. WHO main mandate is oversee and maintain strong relationship with the public health sector, while FAO generally addresses food safety issues along the food production chain. So although we do complement each other, we also work very closely as partners, not only at the country level, but also at the regional level and at global level. Next slide. So just to give a few key events which took place in the last 2 years of COVID, because all of us were thought that with COVID, except for the COVID support to member states, that some of these events would not take place. But we are very happy that the UN Food Summit took place in September 2021. And there were very key decisions which are taken at the Food System Summit on that day. Next slide. There was 5 tracks already identified in the summit, and the key areas which you can see on the slide. I will not read the small print, but to ensure that access to safe and nutritious food for all has been covered. Shift to healthier, sustainable consumption patterns have been looked into. Boosting nature positive production. How do you have good agriculture practices, etc., and protect the environment? Advance equitable livelihoods and value distribution, and building resilience and to vulnerabilities and shocks and stressors. And that's what we are facing globally, also with the Ukraine war, but also in Sri Lanka, which is added more shocks and stressors with the financial crisis. Next slide. The framework action for food safety in our region has been published. You can have a look at it, and I'm sure most of you would have read through that. The next slide. That covers most of the food safety issues, where with the vision which we talk about the food safety for all individuals, and also the outcomes which are in 2 prongs, which talks about this food control system strengthening, and the other arm which is protecting and promoting the support and supporting the consumer's health. And the strategic goals have been given in that particular document, where I'm sure all of you would have read that already. Next slide. So with the regional framework and the food safety document done in the Western Pacific, global food safety strategy was discussed. It was in the pipeline for a long time, and the global food safety strategy was focusing more on a country focus, multi-sectoral collaboration, risk-based approach, as most of you would have heard during today's webinar. Also public-private partnerships, emergency response plans, and also One Health. Because if we don't have a One Health approach, we will be still working in silos. Next slide. So why do we need a global food safety strategy? That is to ensure that we look at the issue of food safety in a global perspective, then not looking only at the regional perspective, because food safety threats can come from one region to another region. So it's important that you look at the global perspective. So the WHO Global Strategy for Food Safety was launched, and it was adopted in the 2021 World Health Assembly. So that's good news, and it's important that all of us go through the World Global Strategy of Food Safety and ensure that we also align in the same chapters as given here, which is also given in the chapters in that particular document. Next slide. These are the 5 areas which talk about strategic priorities. I will not go into detail because of time. It's important to give more time for the participation and asking for questions. Next slide, please. And also this was adopted, as I mentioned, in the 75th World Health Assembly, and also which called for all member states to develop a national roadmap to make appropriate financial resources available to ensure that is ensured. We also have another partnership. Next slide, sir. We also have another partnership which is between the Asia and the Pacific regions, where we have worked together on food safety using One Health approach since 2019. And the importance there is because these 2 regions have a lot of food safety common areas that both regions could work together to overcome. It's a contemporary One Health coordination group, and food safety is one of the key focus areas. And we normally do have a World Food Safety Day event every year. And this year's event also was held a few days ago. And also this group sits down together to identify joint activities for foodborne parasite zoonosis, because as all of us know, zoonotic disease control also has a big role to play when it comes to food safety and also general human health. Next slide. So the STDF, or Standards and Trade Development Facility, is a global partnership to facilitate safe trade. and I'm sure you will have seen the partners given below. The WTO is also a member, WHO, the FAO, OIE, World Bank, and WHO. And some of the standards that are developed are being entrusted has Sri Lanka focus also, to show that Sri Lanka is also active member in this partnership. Next slide, please. You can see that Sri Lanka is mentioned. I took only a few: enhance capacity of cinnamon value chain, improving safety or quality of fruits and vegetables, feasibility study on the value addition of fruit and vegetable sector, etc. So you can see that Sri Lanka is playing a key role in these projects in the region, and we need to encourage more partnerships and our Sri Lankan health systems, agriculture systems, animal husbandry, the academia, and the private sector to lead some of these activities. Next slide. There is also concern with the traditional food markets after the Wuhan incident, and it's important that the risk mitigation documents have been published by WHO, and there are papers on that. It's important that we look into our traditional food markets to see whether there is a threat of zoonotic diseases spilling from animals to humans at these food markets. Next slide. So there is also documents and a communication campaign which also has been provided through the partnerships to show the 5 keys for safer traditional food markets. So I'm sure our colleagues in the animal sector, agriculture sector, and also in our food control administration unit colleagues in the Ministry of Health would look into these and make it available for people awareness in the next few months. Next slide. So what do we have in focus for Sri Lanka? It is we need to look into food security, as would have been mentioned throughout the presentation, but also looking into ensuring that its public health angle is also looked into, and the food is also made safe. We need to increase the capacity to respond to a timely manner to emergencies that adversely affect food security, like we now see in the country, also, which will be a challenge globally, but also look into the safety aspects and nutrition jointly, even in a time of emergency. We need to also promote use of sustainable agriculture and fisheries production as core elements for assuring both food security and economic development, because if the protein requirement is, as Dr. Susil would have mentioned, is getting affected, we need to look at alternate protein sources like inland fisheries, which can be harvested very easily and quickly. We need to also facilitate trade in such a way that Dr. Shamuraja also mentioned, that we need to ensure that whatever we export is safe and healthy, so that there will be more orders coming to our exporters, which can also earn foreign exchange, and also have a good name for producing safe and healthy foods in the country. So we need to facilitate that particular trade, especially the export trade, and also looking into the importation to see whether we only do, import the essential items. A few issues which are highlighted by Dr. Amuraj as well. We also need to protect the health and status of the population, with particular attention reducing the prevalence of undernutrition, stunting, and wasting among the infants and young children, because if we know that if there's a food crisis with the economic crisis, it is going to affect the children's nutrition much earlier than it would affect the adults. So it's important that we look into that type of surveillance. Dr. Renuka and the team at MRI do regular surveys on the nutrition status, and that's something we need to look into. And of course, the second area is the prevalence of NCDs. So thank you very much. That's all I thought. I rushed so that we can save a few more minutes for people to raise their questions at this webinar. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sopmal. Actually, it was a very elaborate presentation. I'm sure we would have gained much more if you were able to do it in a more leisurely manner, but we are sorry about the delay in getting the thing going. So now we have come to the end of our presentations, and it is my pleasure now to invite Professor Samarjeeva to take over the audience as the Q&A session will be handled by Professor Samarjeeva. So over to you, Professor Samarjeeva.
Thank you. Give me a second to get the things organized. I think there will be a slide that should come right now. Well, pending the it has stopped. Yeah, let me start saying this. We had a very good session today where we looked at the various policy aspects, how the things happen globally, and what we should be doing. And then we were focusing on food safety issues that might arise in the light of what has been going on. Now, connected to this activity, we have also produced a Vidurava issue, which is available to be taken up, to be downloaded from the website of the Institute of Food Science and Technology, ifstsl.org, or from the website of the National Science Foundation. Now, it's a joint effort by the IFSTSL and the National Science Foundation, and the purpose of it is to provide you with much more technical details about all these food safety issues surrounding us, the pesticides, the various other aspects, veterinary drugs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, aflatoxins, the things as they are affecting Sri Lanka and what we should be doing to look at that. So that's all what I have to say about the document which you can download. Then
it's
there
now
are a few
available on the chat box, Professor Samarjeeva.
Can you?
Professor, it's now available on the chat box. Anybody can download it now. The document is available on the chat.
Yeah, it's available on the chat box. I don't think I can download it. No. It's not possible. We are running out of time to do that.
The audience can download it, Professor. I think it's in
the audience can download it.
Yeah, no problem.
So there were a few questions which I will take one by one. There was one question about when I mentioned about the leaves of the drumstick, moringa, there's a question, what is the problem with it? Now I need to explain to you, we are used to various types of green leaves like gotukola, kangkung, mukuruana, which we are consuming every day. Now in the crisis situation, if we start moving into new types of leaves, especially those of the leguminous family, like katurumurunga, murunga, and so many others, there are a lot of ingredients, the compounds in it, which will affect our digestion. So specifically, they contain what we call antitrypsin compounds, which means they will go and stop the trypsin activity in our stomach. That means we'll have problems of digestion. Now, in the old days, when we were in the village, it was always said, don't have malung in the night, because it is difficult to find a vedamahatya to get treatments in the night. So all the malung we used to eat during lunchtime and not for dinner. So that tells us the story, which has a very, very ancient explanation, which is explained today with the blocking of the enzymes through the Western knowledge. Then there was another issue, which was about how are we going to use the polkudu? What is the way we could do it? Now, we don't have to make it to go to polkudu. At the home level, we can blend the coconut with water and add it to your curry. Then you are not throwing away the proteins. In the ancient days, we put it into the grinding stone, crush it, and put it back on the food. So that's at home level. So we are not throwing away the proteins. At a higher level, at the industrial level, we can incorporate it into biscuits. So now I know that there are problems with the 3% program. There's no 3% right now. So there's an avenue for us to use this coconut refuse to make biscuits with that much of protein, which I said earlier, and fats to give a good food for the children, for the needy under the current situation of food crisis. Then there was also a question whether we can use coconut meal as animal feed. I think Dr. Susil would be able to answer that, but before I give the floor to him, I would say the issue is we don't have enough coconut meal right now to be used as animal feed. Coconut meal was used as an animal feed. It is being still looked at, but the production is not enough. And on the other hand, the Coconut Authority is moving away from making punek coconut meal because they want to make better money by going for the virgin coconut oil, which will give the flour which could be used as a food for the people, as I said earlier. So it may not go as animal feed now, but it will go as a food for the humans. Then Susil also suggested the use of roadside grasses. Okay, there may be other avenues too, which we could have to think about under this crisis situation. Then there was a question about how can the universities prevent the post-harvest losses and farmers destroying produce. Now, I should say the Institute of Food Science and Technology in 2020 made a proposal to His Excellency incorporating how to handle this problem. I had a discussion with His Excellency from here, and I explained to him, and also I had another discussion with the Honorable Minister of Agriculture through the Skype, and I explained to him what should be done. So some of the proposals I brought were to attach one compartment to the trains coming from Jaffna, Bandaravila and Beliatta to bring the vegetables and fruits to Colombo. That will be a night train, no cooling needed, and all that. But then the people started talking about a full train, not a compartment. And the cost of full train they never realized, and the proposal never went out. Then the second thing I proposed, I suggested that we could organize at the economic centers like Dambulla to collect all the waste vegetables, compost them there, get university students to work with the farmers, produce the compost and give it free to the farmers. When they come to deliver their vegetables, they can take it back in the same truck. That never happened. So these ideas were discussed at the level of minister. At that point, the current Director General of the Agriculture Department also participated in these discussions, but the discussions never continued. So there are ways, but the thing is, there should be committed people to do these things. So these are some of the observations I have. Anybody else want to make any comments? It's time for it. If there are any other questions, I'll be all try to answer. Any other questions? Suggestions?
We can actually now open the floor for the audience for direct questions to any of the panelists.
Yes, it's open. Please tell to whom the question is directed. It will be easier.
So I can see Mr. Prakash's hands up. So
yeah, Dr. Prakash is here. Yeah, yes. Dr.
You are muted. You are muted, Dr. Prakash.
Yeah, is it possible to hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let me congratulate from IUFAS the wonderful food safety webinar that IFSTL and the NSF has done. A great topic and a lot of good information that I saw. As a student of science always, I keep learning. And today was one more day where I learned a lot of food safety, especially pertaining to food and nutrition security of Sri Lanka. My one fundamental question to all the speakers, and of course, for the wisdom of Dr. Pali's Samaravira, is that it's very important for us to look at the whole chain from the field all the way to the farm gate, all the way to the table. In other words, from farm to consumer, the food safety chain is very, very complex. And normally we silo it in small pieces and try to understand. But the larger issue is traceability. So there are three things which are important. Tomorrow's food safety requires a lot more of biotechnology approach through markers. So the analytical system will change itself into a very different dimension altogether. Just like the 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G, we will have a very, very different food safety markers for tomorrow, globally important. Secondly, I would congratulate Dr. Sapumal Dhanapad for the wonderful talk from WHO. It's so important that the codex, we always think, can do a lot of things and we need to follow that. The reverse is also true. I would like to quote India's examples of traditional food and codex. Countries like Sri Lanka can send a lot of information to codex to incorporate many of those systems and make it happen at a codex level. So the local solutions, I want to end up this comment by telling the local solutions many times also solves global problems. And we must be very, very positive in this and very passionate about it to do things. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share and also raise this important point of how many steps are there in each food. And we should never categorize fruits and vegetables, for example. Every fruit has its own journey from seed to need all the way. So therefore, by compartmentalizing, we are oversimplifying the food safety, but it is a very complex issue. But however, it is doable. And therefore, science and scientific tools will endeavor us forever to make this happen. Our vision, dream for a very, very safe food for all humans, including nutrition, is a very important segment of food and nutrition security, as discussed in the UNFSS summit. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prakash, for those valuable comments and suggestions. We appreciate your presence today and following the program, which is something important to us, which is encouraging us to go ahead with our programs. Thank you again, Dr. Prakash. Any other issues that needs to be taken up? Any questions in the
check on the chat box? I think there was another small clarification that came to you.
Yeah, this regarding the combating the rise of micronutrient deficiencies and all that. How viable, feasible is food fortification in this scenario? Well, food fortification is not something unusual, not something unknown. But the issue is we need to scientifically work out with what we are going to fortify the foods. We have the problems of sometimes getting the ingredients to the fortification. Then we may have to start thinking about blending with our local foods. That's where the science becomes important. That's where it becomes very important for us to recognize what nutrients are there and what should be done. Then there was also a continuing question on the industrial application of the coconut refuse. Well, it says may not be able to substitute it 100%. Yes, it's not possible to substitute it 100%, but if you make it 25 to 50%, we have achieved a lot in doing it. And it is being done in Philippines and in other countries, but we are not doing it. So this is another thing which could be taken up seriously, especially under this crisis situation. Without the crisis, people would have been very, very reluctant to talk about eating polkudu. But now the time has come for us to start eating whatever we can get. So we are in a situation where we could make the best use of the crisis to produce better foods and take a different approach. Any other comments, observations will be most appreciated.
I actually would like to open the discussion a little bit onto the food waste situation, as well as how to control these gluts and how to get the distribution and the making it available to the markets rather than just getting it wasted at produce level. I wonder whether there could be anybody else who could, Professor Dr. Dhanapala, would you be able to emphasize a little bit on this area?
I think Iresha and Professor Samarji have done a lot on food waste. But like you said, I think that's a critical area that we all need to look into, and also the global. Globally, also there are ways that food waste has been reduced. Dhammika, and also it's important that you talk about food waste, no?
Food waste, in the sense now we understand that at hotels level, at
That's right.
supermarket level,
yes,
we are losing a lot.
So there has been actions taken in countries where, especially we are going through a financial crisis like here, where they actually do limit and also take action to ensure that the food waste is minimized, especially from like the two places you mentioned, especially hotels and also the supermarkets. I think it's important that that we all need to work together to identify how we can do it in a practical scenario here, because for example in the hotels they follow certain standard when it comes to certain principles and practices to ensure that food safety is ensured, and they do actually throw all the extra food because of the food safety concerns. But I think desperate times will need desperate measures. So like we saw in the European Union during the 2007-8-9, if you read the country records, you can see how they have taken very positive steps early on. And that is something that we need to also work through. But coming back, like as a scientific community, I think IFSTSL should, like Professor Samarji said earlier about the food waste for the time of the market, etc. We also need to, I think, do a document together so that we can lobby the policymakers to ensure that they also look into this aspect as well, because otherwise generally these areas do not get highlighted in a situation like we are in today. So I think Professor Iresha, who is now our president, can have a steering committee and also identify some of the areas. I also saw in the chat box there are other suggestions that we need to work towards. The important thing is sometimes we need to think of small steps. We expect a huge system change as Sri Lankans in a very short time, and sometimes that's not possible. As Professor Samarji always highlighted, when we wanted the food authority to be established, we call it an improved food control administration unit of the Ministry of Health, where we bring in the animal DAPH colleagues and the agriculture colleagues to work under the same roof initially, and then go step by step. I think it's important we start now giving out all these steps one by one, so that the government and the respective bodies can take decisions systematically.
Samarji, I think there was a chat that came in through Dr. Tilak Sirivardhana from the.
It's an observation. We are working with the environmental ministry to create food banks in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, this reminds me another thing which I came across in Myanmar. In a hotel, I saw on every table there was a small note which says, for every gram of food which you are going to leave without consumption, you will have to pay $1. I didn't know whether it materialized or not, but it gave a concept. It gave an idea. Please don't waste your food, because people tend to serve more than what they can eat, and they tend to leave it. So that's another way of handling that kind of situations, I believe. Thank you. Any other participant comments or something?
Sir, I'm Rasangi here. One small comment, just a suggestion. Now, since you talked about these untraditional food sources that people are looking for, like in the time of crisis, so I thought that, like as IFTSL, so we could like make aware the like people, public. So as in your presentation you have mentioned those. So, but now in food preparation, and when you are looking for traditional food sources, what we can do to like get the safety aspect. So maybe we can just like maybe small leaflets. So somehow it will be good to make aware the public. So I guess.
Yeah, I think we could take it up. We could have some small leaflet and some programs which we might be able to deliver to schools and so on, and we'll work towards it. That's a very good suggestion.
Sir, can I come in?
There are no other material for
sir, can I come in?
discussion.
Sapu here.
Yes.
Just I think IFSTSL can take up from what Rasangi just mentioned, sir. I think it's good that we look into the lessons learned from the other country where they are going through a financial crisis, and also identify what are the key steps that they took to ensure that the food availability is increased, and also how they made the food safe even during that type of crisis. Because that is something that was lacking. Although I went through some of the documents which looked into how the health system had been performing, the agriculture incentives, etc. But this particular area, sir, I saw the literature was very limited. So I think, like Dhammika mentioned, sir, if we can put that all into a perspective of a holistic, because we are all, whether we like it or not, we are going into a food crisis as well. So it's always good to be prepared now. Look at all the angles that Dhammika mentioned, Rasangi mentioned, and the others also, so that we can at least have a good 2-page document that we can then share with the general public, the policymakers, and of course the UN can see whether we can come in to assist as much as possible, sir, to promote the idea. I think the colleagues in the academia needs to take a leadership here, sir.
Yeah, I think we can take the leadership with Professor Iresha taking the presidency. And I think it's time for us to start doing something like that. Let's get together and do it. And we will perhaps come back to you once we have a document in our hand.
Dr. Sapumal, just a comment from me. I was so silent for some time because I was facing power issues. So anyway, we all are in crisis. We all have to understand and managing crisis and facing crisis. So just to tell you, I mean, the comment given by Dr. Rasangi. Yes, now in this situation, the government would do everything just to ensure food security. So there is a high possibility that food safety would be neglected. So in such a case, definitely institutes like the Food Science and Technology Sri Lanka. So definitely we have to play a role. So we have to not only just making aware the public, yes, that is possible. Maybe leaflets or small handbooks, that would be a possibility. But I feel I see differently now. This should come from the government and the agencies that who are dealing with food safety now, especially the Food Control Administration Unit need to play a bigger role in this situation now. We have Dr. Tilak Sirivardhana with us here. So Dr. Tilak, I mean, you have a bigger role to play, because while all the other ministries and agencies taking care of food security, definitely being the ministry handling food safety and food quality, you have to play a role. So the Food Advisory Committee and the Food Control Administration Unit must intervene in decision making in order to ensure food security is ensured while embedding food safety. That was one of the things I highlighted in my speech as well. Thank you.
There's a question whether polkudu contains 19% protein. When you work it out on the dry weight basis, when you bring down the moisture, it can contain between 10 to 19%, depending on how much you have extracted with your coconut milk. It varies. It's a big range. Okay, if there is no other discussion, I will hand the floor to Dhammika.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much to all the presenters who took a lot of effort and time in preparing and presenting in today's sessions. We have had numerous discussions during the past few weeks in order to be able to sort of focus our presentations to meet our needs of the day. Even though it was the theme was on health, but we were able to sort of address all the issues within the food safety spectrum. And I wish to thank each and every presenter who took their time and effort to present a very valuable presentations and the whole session. This session will be also available on YouTube in future, so that anybody who wants to go back and refer to some part can do it. And also we will be preparing the documents as some of the speakers mentioned, so that this can be taken forward for fruitful mitigation of the crisis that we are facing right now. So once again, let me thank each and everyone, the organizers as well as the speakers and the entire audience who was with us throughout for being with us. And it was a very fruitful discussion, as mentioned by Dr. Prakash from the US also. So thank you very much, and we look forward to safe and secure tomorrow for Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.